My mother-in-law scrutinized the allergy test results with a piercing gaze. As soon as she confirmed our child's blood type, she erupted, "This is outrageous. This child can't be our son's. We all share the same blood type." She crumpled the test results in a fit of rage and hurled them to the floor. "I had my suspicions ever since you announced your pregnancy. You tricked our son into this." Calmly, I picked up the crumpled paper from the floor and examined it. Then I looked up and said, "Yes, mother-in-law, he's not your son's child. My name is Kay Forrester, 34 years old. I live with my husband, Jake, in a rented apartment in New York. Our relationship began as a workplace romance, and despite his busy schedule, Jake is a kind husband who actively helps with household chores. Even today, when I came home, Jake had washed the frying pan and dishes from breakfast." "Welcome back. Try not to push yourself too hard with the overtime. You won't be able to handle it, okay?" he said. "I'm home," I replied. "Yeah, I know. But I can't just ignore it. I can't help it." While changing into my loungewear in the bedroom, I caught a whiff of a delicious aroma wafting from the kitchen. Tonight's dinner was my favorite, Jake's special fried chicken. I grabbed a can of beer from the fridge and noticed a big circle around the 10th on the calendar. "Oh, I completely forgot. Next Friday is our 7th wedding anniversary. Let's go out for dinner. I feel like having French for a change." "I thought you might say that. I've already made a reservation at a French restaurant in Manhattan," Jake replied. "Really? Thank you. I'm so excited." As I savored a mouthful of fried chicken, I found myself reflecting deeply on the 7 years that had passed since our wedding. We still don't have children. I had always thought that pregnancy would naturally follow marriage, but even after 1 year, 2 years, it didn't happen. My sister, who married 4 years after me, now has 2 kids, and my friends seem to be getting pregnant one after another. In the early years, I wasn't desperate and could genuinely celebrate the pregnancy announcements of those close to me. But now, even hearing about celebrities' pregnancies stings. I despise this part of myself that can't wholeheartedly rejoice in others' happiness. Why will we have a baby? My mobile search history was filled with keywords about pregnancy. Whenever I had a moment to myself, my thoughts would inevitably turn to having a baby. My mother-in-law only added to the stress. It seems the concept of taboo is foreign to her. She barged into our apartment the other day, making sarcastic comments about our childlessness and suggesting divorce. "So, when are you planning to get pregnant?" "I'm tired of waiting," she demanded. "Well, this isn't something we can control. I'm doing my best, you know," I responded. "Don't you feel sorry for Jake because he can't become a father?" "Actually, I also want to see Jake become a father soon. If you really feel that way, why don't you divorce him? I believe there's someone more suitable for Jake. If he marries a healthy woman who can bear children, he'd become a father in no time," she retorted. Her words stung, and though I tried to stay calm, the frustration and sadness were overwhelming. Facing such harsh words with a straight face, I managed to get by all this time thanks to Jake and my father-in-law. They've always stood up for me, often appearing more exasperated with my mother-in-law's obsession with wanting grandchildren than I was. To maintain my peace, I kept a safe distance from her, avoiding unnecessary contact and only acknowledging her on Mother's Day and her birthday. One night, as usual, Jake and I were watching TV after dinner. I had been feeling a little feverish since morning, so I decided to check my temperature. It was slightly elevated at 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I often feel under the weather before my period, but when I checked my period tracking app, I realized my period was late this month. Hurriedly, I retrieved a pregnancy test from the bathroom cabinet. To my surprise, it showed 2 distinct lines indicating a positive result. "Jake, look at this," I said, holding up the test. "What does this mean?" he asked, eyes wide. "It means I'm pregnant," I replied, smile spreading across my face. "We're finally going to have a baby." Overwhelmed with joy, I burst into tears on the spot, reflecting on how much time and money we had spent to reach this moment. After verifying the pregnancy test result multiple times, Jake hugged me tightly. "Thank you for giving up alcohol, smoking, and going to the sauna. Starting today, you're free to enjoy them again." "Nah, compared to the effort you've put in, my sacrifices are nothing. I'll hold off on the drinks until after you've safely given birth. I'm already looking forward to that celebratory drink," Jake replied with a smile. A few days later, we visited the gynecologist, where the pregnancy was confirmed. "There's a baby in my belly," I marveled, experiencing the strange yet warm feeling for the first time. I didn't care about the baby's gender. I just wish for it to be born healthy. I can still vividly recall the moment when I first felt my child's movement in my womb. Every day, Jake would touch my belly and talk to her baby. "Hey, it's Daddy. Can't wait to meet you." "Hey, no, it's too early for you to be born," I'd remind him playfully. Right, my bad. You need to stay in the belly a little longer," he'd respond, laughing. Now, as I enter my 8th month of pregnancy, I feel a mixture of anticipation and excitement. I started my maternity leave and settled into a leisurely routine. One day, while watching a movie with Jake at home, I felt a sudden, rapid soaking sensation accompanied by a popping sound. I instantly realized my water had broken. I called the general hospital where I was scheduled to give birth, and they instructed us to come in immediately. We rushed there by taxi, my excitement outweighing any nervousness. I was finally about to meet my child. Upon arriving at the hospital, labor pains began, marking the start of a long and arduous process. Hours passed without the baby descending, and I reached my physical and mental limits. My screams echoed through the hospital. "I can't do this anymore. It hurts. It hurts." 15 minutes later, our baby finally arrived. "You did well," Jake said, tears streaming down his face as he patted my head. "He's adorable, our baby." The newborn baby was so tiny and fragile that I felt I might break it if I touched it. It was the most precious sight I had ever seen. Just a moment ago, this little one was inside my belly. As I held my baby's tiny, soft finger, a tear rolled down my cheek. I was certain I could do anything for this child. Despite being born prematurely due to my water breaking early and having a low birth weight, our child grew healthily. Time flew by, and before we knew it, it was time to prepare for preschool. "Hey, how about going to the shopping center next Saturday? We need to start buying stuff for preschool," I suggested. "What do we need to get?" Jake asked. "You know, a backpack, water bottle, lunchbox, that sort of stuff," I replied. "Don't they serve lunch at the preschool?" he inquired. "I think it depends on the place, right? Shouldn't we get an allergy test done before starting preschool?" "Ha! But we'll be packing lunch, right?" "Yes, but they provide snacks at preschool. Both of us have food allergies, don't we? We need to check if that has been passed on." "You're right, it's a concern. Yeah, let's take our child for an allergy test soon." The following week, we took our child to the hospital for an allergy test. There was a section of the questionnaire asking if we wanted to check the blood type as well. Since the blood type check was free, we decided to go for it. The test results will be sent to us by email later. The world has indeed become very convenient. A few days later, when I returned from shopping, there was an envelope in our mailbox. The allergy test results had arrived. After washing my hands, I immediately opened the envelope to check the results. As expected, our child has a few food allergies. I felt a bit guilty about this, but it's okay. Jake and I have learned a lot about managing food allergies. There are many alternative and allergy-friendly foods available, and some children's allergic reactions lessen as they grow. I put the test results on the refrigerator door with a magnet so Jake could check them later. "All right, I think I'll start preparing dinner," I said to myself. As I put away the groceries, the doorbell rang. Checking the footage of the front porch, I found my in-laws standing there unexpectedly. Frustrated by their unannounced visit, I opened the front door. "Hello, father-in-law, mother-in-law. It's been a while." "Okay, we're sorry for dropping by unannounced. I told Lisa that we should have informed you in advance," my father-in-law said. "We don't need to inform anyone when visiting our own son's house. Now, please let us see our grandchild," my mother-in-law declared, barging in and spreading out the children's clothes and toys she was holding all over the living room. "All high-end stuff," she noted. My mother-in-law is a brand fanatic, the complete opposite of me, as I have no interest in luxury brands. I started boiling water to make tea for my in-laws. "Wait a minute, Kay, what are you doing?" my mother-in-law asked. "Oh, I'm just about to serve tea. Please wait a moment," I replied. "I don't want to drink such cheap tea. Don't you have any other beverages?" my mother-in-law said, striding confidently over to the fridge. But then she froze in front of it, her gaze fixed on the paper stuck to its surface. "What's this?" "Oh, we thought of having an allergy test done before our child starts preschool," I explained. "That's not what I meant. I'm talking about this blood type," she insisted. "Ha!" I followed her gaze to the blood type next to her child's name. It read type A. My mother-in-law's face turned beet red as she started yelling at me. "Okay, you are the worst. Calm down, please, mother-in-law, I urged, trying to diffuse the tension. How can I stay calm? This is not our son's child. All of us are type O. With a burst of anger, my mother-in-law crumpled up the test results paper and threw it on the floor. I knew something was off when you announced your pregnancy. Okay, you cheated. I want you to divorce Jake. Of course, we'll be seeking compensation. I calmly picked up the crumpled test result paper from the floor, and then I was certain of something. Actually, mother-in-law, it's the other way around. Jake is not your son. Jake has type O blood. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law became enraged, claiming it was impossible because both she and my father-in-law have type O blood, accusing me of lying. She insisted that their son should also have type O blood as per what she heard at the time of his birth. My mother-in-law wasn't aware that a newborn's blood type is not reliable and can change as they grow. Here's the proof, I said, seizing the moment to show her a piece of paper. It was the results of a blood test that my husband Jake had taken as part of our infertility treatment. His blood type unmistakably was A. Seeing this, my mother-in-law turned pale and silently sat down on a chair. She began to sweat coldly, obviously rattled. My usually quiet father-in-law spoke up. What does this mean, Lisa? There's a reason behind this. A reason? Are you going to make excuses? Stop messing around. This was the first time I'd seen my father-in-law explode with such anger. I quickly told my child to go into the other room. Even if they couldn't understand yet, I didn't want them hearing this messy conversation. After a few minutes of tense silence, my mother-in-law, seemingly resigned, started to tell the truth through her tears. It was a revelation that dated back 30 years. Early in their marriage, my father-in-law often embarked on long business trips abroad, a necessity of his job in a trading company. Despite the circumstances, he had no choice but to accept these assignments. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, feeling isolated after moving away from her hometown and lacking nearby friends, found solace in an affair born of loneliness. Shockingly, that other man was a junior colleague my father-in-law held in high regard. It was a revelation that shattered the illusion of our family's history. Jake, unwittingly at the center of it all, was the child born from the affair between my mother-in-law and her lover. How would Jake react to this bombshell? My worry for him consumed me. Yet to my surprise, Jake seemed oddly unfazed by the news. He never verbalized it, but his calm demeanor suggested he may have known the truth all along, perhaps from the subtle clues that hinted at his non-biological connection to his parents. Since the day the shocking truth was revealed, I haven't crossed paths with my mother-in-law at all. There was one email from her, but I deleted it without a second thought. Later, my father-in-law, understandably outraged by the decades-long deception, presented divorce papers to my mother-in-law. It was a necessary step. With her history of infidelity, my mother-in-law had no grounds to refuse, and the divorce was finalized smoothly. My mother-in-law, who had lived a life of luxury as a stay-at-home wife fully dependent on my father-in-law, now seems to be grappling with the reality of making ends meet. I wonder if she's considering finding employment. I ponder if there's a place where she can start working. Well, it's none of my business. When I think about what my mother-in-law did to my father-in-law and the hurtful words she directed at me, there's no room for sympathy. On the bright side, the relationship between my father-in-law and my husband Jake is still strong. It was all my mother-in-law's doing, and Jake is blameless. Even without a biological tie, after 30 years of raising him, he's truly my son, my father-in-law assured Jake. Despite the divorce from my mother-in-law, my father-in-law continues to show kindness not only to Jake but also to me and our child. He takes us out to eat once a month and even brings back souvenirs from his trips for us. Previously, I used to wake up in the morning dreading what unpleasantness the day would bring. But now, I wake up with anticipation, wondering what wonderful things will happen. My world is beginning to brighten. Another new day unfolds. Today, as I wake up, my husband and child prepare breakfast, pack lunches, and change clothes. There's so much to do. Surrounded by my beloved family, I am genuinely happy.
I'm Goldie. Picture this, I'm 30, hitched to a solid guy, Alex. He's got the reins of this family gig, a trading company that's been in his bloodline since before I was even an idea. I land a gig there not long after we tie the knot, slinging deals as a sales agent. And guess what? Figures shot through the roof the minute I started. Alex gets a kick out of it, always cracks the same joke. Babe, you didn't just bring love, you hauled in the big bucks too. So, there's your fairy tale start, right? But life's got a funny way of throwing you curveballs. Now, Mary, the mother-in-law, she's a piece of work, you know? And Cynthia, her daughter, she prances around like she's Queen Bee because she's got some fancy letters behind her name. It's my first dinner at their place, and I'm all dolled up, trying to make a good impression. We're sitting there, around this table that's too big for any sort of cozy conversation, and the third degree starts. So, Goldie, Mary starts, peering at me like I'm some specimen under a microscope. Which college did you grace with your presence? I tell her straight, went to state. Got my degree and learned a ton about the real world. She snorts, and there's this moment, brief as a heartbeat, where I see Cynthia trying to hide her own sneer. State, Mary echoes, like it tastes bad just saying it. And Cynthia, oh, she jumps right in, smug as a cat in the cream. An MBA from Harvard on my end, she flaunts, leaning back with this smirk that got under my skin in a real quick minute. I'm not one to back down, so I shoot back, cool, but it's what you got up here. I tap my head. That matters, not where you sat on your butt getting it. Their chuckles go cold, but I don't give a toss. I'm not there to play doormat to their uptown attitudes. Dinner wraps up, and I'm thinking, okay, rocky start, but we can smooth this over, right? Wrong. Next thing I know, Alex is getting an earful from Mary about how Cynthia, the golden child, should join us at the company. And it ain't just any old job she's vying for, she's shotgunning straight for my department's top spot. Well, she has an MBA from Harvard, Alex. Mary presses, stating the obvious like it's some trump card. She's perfect for head of sales. And what's nuttier is Alex actually caves. Before I can even protest, it's a done deal. Cynthia waltzes in like she owns the place, and here I thought we were playing fair in love and war. From day one, she's throwing her weight around, lips curled in this permanent sneer every time our paths cross. I get it, lady, you think you're hot stuff. But around these parts, you gotta earn your stripes, not just show 'em. It wasn't so much what she said, it's what she did, or didn't do. You get me? It's the coffee she'd let go cold when an intern brought it to her, the sideways glances and snide digs at my expense, the way she'd talk shop as if she's got years on me. Alex sees it, I know he does, but what's he gonna do? It's his mom and sis firing at him with both barrels if he steps out of line. I land at work, and it's like walking into a storm. Cynthia's there, perched at her desk like she's the captain of a ship. But here's the kicker, she ain't sailing, she's sinking us, one bad decision at a time. Take last Tuesday. I'm in early, coffee in hand, trying to keep things afloat, and in struts Cynthia, dropping her purse with a thud that says, I'm in charge. She calls me into her office, right? Sits me down and starts in with this list of orders that'd choke a horse. Goldie, see these files? She waves some papers at me, scattered like confetti. Fix them. And I need it yesterday. I'm staring at this mess and thinking, lady, you've done lost your mind. But I bite my tongue, nod, and get to it. Fast forward a couple of hours, and I'm untangling her knots, right? That's when Mr. Jacobs calls. This guy's big league, think whales in a sea of fish. I can hear the tension a mile away. What's this crap Cynthia sent me, Goldie? He barks through the line. I asked for projections, not preschool scribbles. I'm juggling phones, trying to soothe him. Mr. Jacobs, I got this. Give me an hour. I hang up, track Cynthia down, and she's there painting her nails like she's at a spa. Cynthia, you gotta double check your work. Jacobs is ready to walk. She doesn't even glance up. Not my prob, Goldie. You handle it. So there I am, patching holes in a sinking ship while she's giving herself a manicure. I spend the whole day in damage control, but hey, I do love a challenge. And Jacobs? He's cool by the time we're done, thanks to yours truly. But it doesn't end there, oh no. You think she'd say thanks? As if. The next day, I catch wind of a meeting, right? Alex and Cynthia are at it, voices through the roof. I sidle up to the door, and who do I run into but Mary, listening in like it's the season finale of her favorite show. I'm about to step in, but she grips my arm, nails digging in like claws. "Leave them," she hisses, all snake-like. "This is family business." I wrench free, feeling her eyes on my back, and open the door. There's Cynthia, tears and all, playing up a storm. "Alex, I'm trying, but Goldie's always undermining me." I'm floored. If her lies were dirt, we'd be buried alive. Alex is standing there, and I can see he's torn. He wants to believe his wife, but Sister Dearest is laying it on thick. I speak up. "Alex, come on. You and I know that's a load of bull." Cynthia whips around, all drama. "See?" She points right at me, accusing like I'm the bad guy in some cheap novel. We're nose to nose, practically. "You wanna explain, Jacobs, then?" I challenge her, my voice level. Alex pipes up, tired lines around his eyes. "Enough, both of you." I take a deep breath, ready to battle this out, but Mary barges in, cutting the air like a knife. "Goldie's just jealous, Alex. You can see it." I'm about to say my piece, but it's like talking to a wall with those two, no, three. They've made up their minds, and I'm the villain in their fairy tale. It was a Tuesday, nothing out of the ordinary, until I got the call. Alex had a wreck. Some jerk ran a red and my world flipped upside down. The hospital, the blinking machines, Alex looking too still, it was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was in that hospital room, feeling like someone scooped out my insides. But here's the deal, which, trust me, made my heart sink even lower if that's possible. According to Alex's will, only a blood relative can take over the company. That should have been our kids, if we had any. Without them, it defaulted to his next of kin, which turned out to be his sister, Cynthia. So, just like that, I'm on the outside looking in. My husband isn't even cold, and already the wolves are circling. So while I'm drowning in grief, here come Mary and Cynthia, all pep and no sympathy, already divvying up the spoils before the battle's even done. Cynthia wastes no time throwing it in my face, right there in the hospital corridor. "You see, Goldie, it's all clear-cut. Alex's will is as plain as day. Blood relatives only. With Alex." She trails off, like even saying coma would jinx her takeover. I could barely keep the snarl from my voice. "So, what? You're dancing on his grave already? The man is fighting for his life." She just rolled her eyes, as cold as the sterile hospital walls. "Business waits for no one, dear. It's unfortunate, yes, but we must think of the future. And as for you," she stepped closer, "well, you were just the wife. As I see it, you were never really part of the company, not like family." Mary nodded, her lips in a thin line. "Cynthia's right. You have no children, Goldie. It was always going to be her." That was it. Their true colors, loud and clear. They didn't give a damn about Alex, only about what they could grab from his still warm hands. I walked away from them, my mind a chaos of grief and fury. I had to do something, but what? Every fiber of my being was woven into that company, into the life Alex and I had built. I wasn't just going to let them steal it. Days turned to weeks, and Alex didn't wake up. The company felt his absence like a missing limb, and Cynthia's reign didn't sit right with anyone, they all felt it too. One afternoon, Cynthia blocked my path by the copier, her arms folded over her chest. "Still here, Goldie? I'd have thought you'd take the hint and leave with some dignity." I locked eyes with her, my back ramrod straight. "Dignity? You wouldn't recognize it if it bit you. This isn't over, Cynthia." Her laugh was empty, but her eyes were sharp. "Oh, it's over. It was over the minute that will was drafted. Alex's beloved wife or not, you're nothing to this company. Better start looking for a new job." I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting blood. "We'll see." I turned on my heel and left her standing there. Her words were meant to cut deep, but they just fueled a fire in me. I wasn't about to roll over. The employees, they were with me, they knew where the heart of the company lay, and it wasn't with Cynthia. Day in and day out, I found myself in the same routine, pulling up a chair next to Alex's hospital bed after surviving another round of corporate warfare. The beep of the machines had become my unfortunate companion, the soundtrack to our one-sided conversations. Despite the coma, I'd tell Alex everything, hoping, praying he could hear me. "Alex, you won't believe the circus your company's turned into," I'd start, my voice a low murmur, laced with fatigue. "Your sister, she's taken over, bulldozed her way through the board, and camped out in your office like she's queen of the castle. She's axed Dan and Rita, just like that, because they wouldn't bow down. And the clients? They're jumping ship left and right. The Henderson deal, the one you worked months on, is dead in the water. They've had it with her." Each visit blurred into the next, the hospital walls absorbing my endless monologue, full of updates and frustrations. I'd scoff and curse, my tone growing bitter as I recounted the latest sabotage. "And let's not get started on your mom," I continued, the bitterness in my voice growing sharper. "She struts around the office now, tossing digs at me every chance she gets. When Alex wakes up, you're out, she sniped at me yesterday. As if I haven't poured my soul into this company too." I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill, talking to Alex's motionless form. My husband, the man who promised to tackle life's ups and downs with me, was silent, caught in an endless sleep. Yet, I clung to the sliver of hope that someday he'd crack open his eyes and we'd really talk. Then it happened, so unexpectedly it knocked the breath out of me. In the middle of a particularly tough rant about how his sister's latest stunt might be the downfall of the entire business, Alex's eyes flicked open. They found mine, and the corners of his lips turned up in what I knew was meant to be a reassuring grin. It was a bittersweet smile that didn't quite reach the old spark that used to dance in his eyes, but it was more than enough. "Alex, you're back? Can you hear me?" My voice cracked, a mix of joy and disbelief. Before I could let the moment get the better of me, his hand, stronger than I'd felt in ages, clasped mine, and he gave a near imperceptible shake of his head. It was a silent plea to keep this moment between us. "You sly dog," I said, a laugh bubbling out of me in relief. "We're keeping this our little secret then, huh?" His smile said it all as he closed his eyes again, like this was just a brief break from his rest. But that grip on my hand didn't let up. I leaned in close. "All right, Your Highness, we'll play it your way. We'll let them think nothing's changed. But you and me, we're gonna turn this around. Wait and see." Leaving the hospital that night felt different. There was something like hope, or was it defiance, brewing inside me. I'd go to the office tomorrow, face Cynthia and his mom, and act like it was all the same, all while knowing Alex was coming back to me. Days turned into weeks, holding in the secret like clenching a fist around a live wire. That wire jolted out of my hands the day I got called to the lion's den, or what used to be Alex's place before Cynthia turned it into a sort of throne room for her ego. I walked into that office, a storm brewing in my chest. Cynthia was perched on the edge of Alex's desk like she was waiting for a parade in her honor. Mary lounged in a corner, looking all smug. "Time to hit the road," Cynthia tossed the words out without even looking directly at me. She had the termination papers already laid out like she was dealing cards at a shoddy casino. Mary piped up from her corner with that gravelly voice of hers. With Alex out of the picture, Cynthia's running the show. I was one twitch away from telling them where they could shove those papers, but I clenched my fists, instead, teeth grinding. And just like some Hollywood timing, the door swung open with a bang. There was Alex. He looked rough around the edges, but still standing, still breathing, still mine. Cynthia's face dropped like she just swallowed a bug. Alex didn't miss a beat. "Cynthia, get out of my chair." He spat the words out. His voice held less of its usual command, sure, but it had a bite. My eyes could barely peel away from him, but I had to see Cynthia's reaction. Her face twisted like she was chewing on glass. "What the, Alex? How are you?" Alex cut her off. "Standing? Talking? Surprise, sis. I'm not as gone as you hoped." Mary tried to back her daughter up. "This isn't happening. He's supposed to be drooling in a bed?" "Yeah, well, life's full of surprises." Alex snapped back, his eyes never leaving Cynthia. "Now, off my chair. We're going to have a real nice chat." Cynthia stood, stumbling a bit like her legs were made of wet noodles. "You can't just come back and what? Take back my company?" "Oh, I think I can," Alex interrupted, moving closer to his desk. I stepped forward, standing next to Alex. The two of us. United front. "Yeah, Cynthia." I pitched in. "Hurling people out on their asses is your specialty. Time to see how it feels, huh?" Cynthia clenched her jaw so tight I could hear her teeth grind, while Mary was still trying to process the scene, looking like her software crashed. "Alex, you're sick. I need my company back. You two," he waved a dismissive hand at them. "You're done here." Cynthia's face was now the color of rotten tomatoes. "I'll call the board. They won't stand for this." Alex looked over at me, a knowing glint in his eye. "The board's in on it, aren't they, babe?" I nodded, barely holding back a smile. "Yep. Heard from them this morning. They're thrilled you're back. Even sent flowers." Cynthia still tried to have the last word. "This isn't over, Alex." "No, it is. For you." Alex's words cut her off, as short and final as a door slam. Cynthia's eyes flitted between Alex and me, the defeat finally sinking in as she grabbed her mom's arm. They left, not with the whiff of victory but with tails between their legs. Then, it was just us, alone in the room that had seen more drama than a daytime soap. "You played it well, Alex. Had me scared too," I managed to say, my voice shaking off the last bits of worry and fear. He slumped into his chair, looked up at me with those eyes I fell for. Had to make it believable. Couldn't let them ruin everything we've built. I took his hand, a surge of pride washing over me. "They didn't. And they won't." Alex's grip on my hand tightened, the fight still there. "Time for some damage control." I shot back, more like a full-on fixer-upper. "But together, we'll patch it up." Alex laughed, that familiar sound, but this time it was a little more victorious. I laughed too. It was over, this round at least. We were back in the game, Alex and I, ready to rebuild and face whatever came next. The office was humming like a kicked anthill when I walked in, fresh energy lighting up the place. With the dead weights cut off, Alex's office felt like a command center ready for a new mission. His recovery had flipped the switch on our future, and we were gunning the engine hard. I found Alex in the middle of the fray, barking orders to the team but with a grin that said he was back to his old self. "Okay, team. Let's not waste any more time," he said. "We've got a whole chunk of backlog to clear and new deals to chase." I leaned against the doorframe, watching my husband rally the troops. He caught sight of me and winked. "Hey, you're part of this too. Roll up your sleeves." Chuckling, I walked over. "Do I get a title for this, or just the usual Alex's better half?" He chuckled. "How about co-captain?" Co-captain rang out well, so I nodded. "Co-captain, reporting for duty." Turning to the team, Alex made introductions. "Everyone, meet the co-captain of this ship. She steered it through the storm while I was out." The team clapped, and a few here's rolled through the group. It felt good, really good, like we were a family that had weathered the worst. As the team dispersed to get back to work, I sat down with Alex. "So, what's the game plan?" I asked, comfy in the swivel chair I had commandeered. "We're shaking the tree, babe. Ditching the bad apples that Cynthia brought in." Alex sounded pumped. There were spreadsheets all over his desk, plans scribbled on paper. I pointed to the papers. "Hiring new blood?" "Yep. And we're putting money into developing our team. Training, seminars. No more throwing them in the deep end, he replied, highlighting a section that said team growth. I added, not just survival of the fittest, then. Alex shook his head, nah, it's about thriving, not just surviving. We both knew the buzz in the office was more than just people being busy. It was hope, rebooted and recharged. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ted, our old supplier. Hey, he's asking about the contracts. Should we bring him back in? Alex paused for a moment. Yeah, I think it's time. He was with us since the start. Let's not ditch loyalty. I nodded. Loyalty pays. I'll draft up something nice and comfy. The word comfy had Alex grinning. He knew that meant terms good enough to lock Ted in tightly. Just as I was about to get up and get to it, Alex grabbed my hand. Hey, I never got to say it properly, thank you. For not giving up when I was, well, you know. I squeezed his hand. No need for thanks. It's us against the world, right? Right? He confirmed, and we locked eyes in a moment of silent understanding, the kind that said we were a team, through thick and thin. My phone vibrated. It was Cynthia, rambling on about another blown job interview. They don't get it, you know? I'm leadership material. They want me to start from scratch. No way. Alex overheard and shook his head. She needs to start at the bottom, learn to crawl before she can boss around. I nodded. Right. But try telling her that. Cynthia wasn't the only family headache. Alex's mom was a constant buzz in our background, mad about the money tap getting twisted shut. She called again, and Alex glanced at the phone, letting it ring out. Your mom again? I asked, already knowing the answer. He sighed. Yep. She's been blowing up my phone since I stopped the cash flow. The memories of them assuming the worst when Alex was sick, bordering on vulture circling, stayed fresh. Alex finally picked up on the fifth ring, keeping it clipped. Mom, it's done. You've got to deal with it. The line got real loud, real quick. His mother's voice shrilled through, but Alex held his ground. When the call ended, he was tired but firm. No more free rides. I wrapped an arm around him. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, it's just draining. Let's not let them spoil tonight, okay? I suggested, wanting to steer clear of the drama for once. Agreed. Besides, he said, there's something better to talk about. His hint hung in the air, and I smiled. A baby? He smiled back, full of hope and love, his eyes lighting up at the possibility. Shifting gears from family drama to our own little unit felt like the right move. The notion of a kid, of starting fresh with our own small tribe, seemed to seal the deal on the new beginnings front. Turning off the lights, locking up the office that was once a battleground, we left for the day, hand in hand, a team thinking about adding a new member. Beneath the calm of making plans for the future, there's that undercurrent of family strain. But it's getting easier to let their calls go to voicemail, to ignore the bitter texts. We're not cold, just done. Done with the guilt trips, the scrambling to appease. It's about our little family now. And maybe, just maybe, this fresh start isn't just a new chapter in the business. Driving home, I sat with that thought, thumbing the little baby shoes we'd impulsively bought, a symbol of hope, of new life. So, about baby names, Alex started. I smothered a laugh. Already? He shrugged. Never too early. The streetlights flickered past, each one a beacon in the easy silence of our drive, each one guiding us away from the chaos and towards something better. Mary, are you sure about this? My best friend, Lucy, asked as we sat in my small, but cozy living room. The walls were lined with bookshelves, a testament to my love for fantasy and writing. I sighed, pushing a lock of hair behind my ear. About marrying Alex? Yeah, I am. But his family? That's a whole different story. Lucy raised an eyebrow, her skepticism clear. Especially his mom, huh? I nodded. Mrs. Thompson, Alex's mother, she's something else. Always prying, always judging. And don't get me started on the wedding plans. The doorbell rang, and in came Mrs. Thompson, as if on cue, with her usual air of self-importance. "Mary, dear, we need to talk about the wedding dress," she said, barely a hello. I braced myself. "What about it, Mrs. Thompson?" She waved a dismissive hand. "The one you chose, it's just not suitable. I found the perfect one yesterday. It's only a bit over your budget." "A bit?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Well, it's double your budget. But it's worth it," she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. I exchanged a helpless look with Lucy. "Mrs. Thompson, I can't afford that." "Nonsense," she snapped. "It's your special day. You can cut corners elsewhere. This dress is a must." Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed. It was easier than arguing. The next day, we went to the bridal shop. The dress was indeed beautiful, but the price tag made my stomach churn. As I tried it on, Mrs. Thompson gushed over how stunning I looked. "It's settled then," she said, clapping her hands together. "We'll take it." I hesitated. "But the price, Mrs. Thompson?" "Don't you worry," she interrupted, "I'll help you out. Consider it my gift to you." Relief washed over me. Maybe I had misjudged her. Fast forward to the wedding day, the dress was a hit. Everyone complimented me, and I felt like a princess. But after the wedding, when I approached Mrs. Thompson about the dress payment, she conveniently forgot her promise. "Mary, dear, I never said I'd pay for the whole thing. I said I'd help. You know, with the choosing." I was flabbergasted. "But you said..." She waved me off. "You must have misunderstood. Anyway, it's done now. No use crying over spilt milk." I stood there, feeling cheated and foolish. Lucy was right. I should have been more careful. It was a Thursday, just like any other, except it wasn't. I was in my home office, the smallest room in the house, cluttered with my writing stuff. The only place where I could find some peace, or so I thought. The sound of the doorbell shattered the quiet. I knew who it was without even looking. Mrs. Thompson had this habit of showing up unannounced, as if our house was a public park. "Mary, dear, I'm here," she bellowed from the living room, not bothering to wait for me to answer the door. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the ordeal ahead. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson," I greeted, trying to sound pleasant. "Oh, there you are, hiding in your little room," she said, peering around with a look of disdain. "You really should get out more, dear." I forced a smile. "I'm actually quite busy with my writing." "Writing, schmitting." She waved her hand dismissively. "You need to live a little. Now, where's the remote? I want to catch my show." As she plopped onto the sofa, turning on the TV, I couldn't help but feel a surge of irritation. My home was turning into her daytime retreat. "Mrs. Thompson, I was hoping to get some work done today," I said, trying to sound firm yet polite. She looked at me, her eyebrows raised. "Oh, don't be silly. Your little stories can wait. I need to relax. You know, I save so much on my electricity bill coming here." I was at a loss for words. The audacity was astounding. And to make matters worse, she headed straight for the kitchen next. "What's for lunch, Mary? I'm starving," she called out, rummaging through the fridge. I followed her, my frustration growing. "Mrs. Thompson, I haven't prepared lunch yet. I was planning to eat later." She shrugged, pulling out ingredients. "No problem, I'll make do with whatever you have. You should really stock up better, though." There I was, watching her take over my kitchen, using my groceries. The sense of intrusion was overwhelming. Alex walked in just then, home for lunch. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Just visiting, darling. Mary and I are having a lovely time," she lied smoothly. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd say something, but he just shrugged and sat down, turning his attention to the TV. It was clear where he stood, or rather, where he chose to sit, firmly on the fence. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow into my small home office. The walls, lined with shelves of fantasy novels and manuscripts, seemed to close in on me as I sat there, typing away. My world of mythical creatures and grand adventures was a sharp contrast to the reality I was living. The door to my sanctuary burst open with a force that made me jump. Mrs. Thompson stormed in, her face twisted in a mix of disgust and irritation. "Mary, what in the world are you still doing cooped up in here? It's like you're married to that damn computer. There's a real world out there, you know," she exclaimed, her voice laced with contempt. I sighed, pausing my typing. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm working. This is my job, my career." She let out a derisive snort. "Job? You call sitting on your behind all day, making up fairy tales, a job? That's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard." I tried to keep my voice steady. Writing is a legitimate profession. I'm a published author. It's not just a hobby. She rolled her eyes dramatically. "Published, schmublished. All this nonsense about dragons and magic wands. It's child's play. Get a real job, contribute something useful to society." Her words were like a barrage of arrows, each one striking its mark. Before I could muster a response, my husband Alex walked in, his expression mirroring his mother's disapproval. "What's the racket about?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Your wife here thinks she's doing the world a favor with her silly stories," Mrs. Thompson said, waving a dismissive hand at my computer. Alex's gaze fell on me, cold and judgmental. "Mary, Mom's right. This isn't a real job. When are you going to stop living in this fantasy world and do something worthwhile?" I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Alex, I am doing something worthwhile. I'm a writer. My books are sold internationally." He let out a cynical laugh. "International? Please, don't make me laugh. How much do you even make from these so-called books?" "It's a joke." I clenched my fists, trying to control the rising tide of anger and frustration. "My writing does contribute. It's not just about the money. It's my passion, my life's work." Alex shook his head, an expression of mock pity on his face. "Passion won't pay the bills, Mary. It's time you grew up and got a proper job, one that pays regularly." The conversation was going in circles, their words cutting deeper each time. I felt like I was being suffocated, my dreams and aspirations trampled under their relentless criticism. "Look, I don't need this," I finally said, standing up. "I don't need to justify my career to anyone." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so now you're getting defensive? Classic. When you can't face the truth, you just run away." I bit back a sharp retort, knowing it would only fuel their fire. Mrs. Thompson, sensing my defeat, added one last jab. "Think about what we said, Mary. It's for your own good. You can thank us later when you're living in the real world." With that, they left, leaving me alone in my office, surrounded by my books, my work, my world. But their words echoed in the room, each syllable a reminder of how little they understood or respected me. I wondered how much longer I could endure this environment, where my aspirations were nothing but a source of ridicule. The future, once bright with possibilities, now seemed dim and uncertain. It was a typical Saturday morning, the kind that usually promised relaxation and peace. But for me, it heralded the start of the dreaded weekend ritual. The clock had barely struck 10 when I heard the familiar commotion at the front door. It was Susan, Alex's sister, with her 3 kids in tow. "Hey, Mary," Susan called out cheerily as she barged in, the kids already scattering to different corners of the house. "Hope we're not too early." I forced a smile, hiding my dismay. "No, not at all. Good morning, everyone." Susan, oblivious to my discomfort, plopped herself on the sofa. "Phew, what a week. I'm beat. The kids have been driving me up the wall. Thank God for Saturdays, right?" I nodded, a sense of resignation settling in. Right. Would you like some coffee? That'd be great, thanks, she said, already engrossed in her phone. As I made my way to the kitchen, dodging toys and narrowly avoiding a collision with the youngest, I couldn't help but feel like an unpaid nanny and housekeeper. By the time I returned with the coffee, the living room resembled a war zone. Susan looked up, unfazed by the chaos. Oh, Mary, could you whip up some of your pancakes? The kids are starving. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation. Sure, I'll get started on that, I replied, my weekend plans vanishing like smoke. The kitchen became my battleground as I juggled pancakes, coffee, and managing the kids. Amidst the flipping and serving, Alex sauntered in, his expression sour. Mary, why do you always buy these expensive ingredients? We need to cut down on expenses, he grumbled, eyeing the breakfast spread. I sighed, trying to keep my frustration in check. Alex, your sister and her kids eat here every weekend. It adds up. He shrugged, dismissive. Well, they're family. You can make do with less fancy stuff. Save some money. The rest of the day passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and catering to endless demands. By the time Susan herded her kids out the door, I was drained, both physically and emotionally. As I slumped onto the couch, Alex walked over, a frown on his face. You know, you have to save some money on my nephews and my sister. I looked at him, incredulous. Me? You're the one who never says no to her. And you criticize me for spending too much? He rolled his eyes. Just trying to help you manage better. You could learn to be more economical, you know. The irony of his words was almost laughable. There I was, running a weekend daycare and diner, and he was lecturing me on being economical. I wanted to scream, to tell him how unfair it all was. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. The house was finally quiet, a stark contrast to the usual daytime chaos. It was my time, the only time I could dedicate to my writing without interruptions. The clock ticked past midnight as I settled into my office, the soft glow of the computer screen my only companion. As I lost myself in the world of my creation, the door creaked open. Alex stood there, his face a mix of annoyance and fatigue. Mary, are you seriously still up? You know how much this will spike our electricity bill? I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my cool. It's the only time I have, Alex. You know how hectic it gets during the day. He leaned against the doorframe, his expression hardening. Hectic? You mean, taking care of your family? That's what you're supposed to do, Mary. And this night owl routine, it's not helping. Think about the bills, for once. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The bills? Really, Alex? That's your concern right now? Not the fact that I'm sacrificing my sleep, my health, to pursue my career? He rolled his eyes. Career? You mean this little hobby of yours? Come on, Mary. Be realistic. You need to get your priorities straight. I felt a surge of frustration. This hobby of mine is important to me, Alex. It's my passion, my work. Can't you see that? He shook his head, dismissive. All I see is unnecessary expenses and a wife who's more interested in her fantasies than her family. The hurt from his words was palpable. I stood up, facing him. My writing is part of who I am, Alex. I can't just give it up because you think it's impractical. He snorted. Impractical is an understatement. It's a waste of time and money. You could be doing something more productive, you know. I felt a lump in my throat, the words stinging like a physical blow. I am being productive, in my own way. Why can't you understand that? Alex shrugged, a cold, indifferent gesture. Maybe I would, if it actually brought in some real money. Until then, it's just a nuisance. With that, he turned and left, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room. The words on the screen blurred as tears pricked my eyes. I was struggling to keep my dream alive, and the person who was supposed to support me the most just didn't get it. The kitchen was stifling, the air thick with tension. I was stirring the pot when Alex came in, his mother, Mrs. Thompson, trailing behind him like a shadow. The news he dropped was like a bombshell. "Susan and her husband are taking off for 2 weeks. They need us to watch the kids," Alex announced, a note of finality in his voice. I froze, spoon in hand. 2 weeks? That's a huge ask, Alex. Mrs. Thompson chimed in immediately, her tone sharp. "It's family, Mary. You can't say no to family." I could feel the frustration building up. "But my writing, I have deadlines. I can't be a full-time babysitter." Alex scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're writing? Come on, Mary. It's not like you're penning the next bestseller. Family comes first." I turned to Mrs. Thompson, seeking some support. "Maybe the kids could stay with you?" She recoiled as if I'd suggested something outrageous. "Me? Look after 3 young ones at my age? Absolutely not. I've done my time raising kids." Desperate, I grasped at another solution. "What about hiring a nanny then? Just for those 2 weeks?" Both of them looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "A nanny?" Mrs. Thompson spat out the word. "Why waste money on that when you're already here?" Alex nodded in agreement. "Exactly. We're not made of money, Mary. You need to be sensible about this." I was incredulous. "Sensible? You're asking me to give up 2 weeks of my life, my work, for free, and I'm the one who needs to be sensible?" Alex's face hardened. "It's not a negotiation, Mary. This is what families do for each other. You're part of this family, or have you forgotten?" I felt a surge of anger. "No, Alex, I haven't forgotten. But it seems like you've forgotten that I have a life and commitments of my own." Mrs. Thompson snorted. "Commitments? To those fanciful scribblings of yours? Don't be so dramatic. It's just 2 weeks of babysitting." Feeling cornered, I raised my voice. "It's not just babysitting. It's my time, my career. Why can't either of you understand that?" Alex's expression turned cold. "Because, Mary, in the real world, people don't get to live in their fantasy land. They make sacrifices. They do what's necessary for family." I was shaking with frustration. "And what about what's necessary for me? Don't my dreams and aspirations matter to you at all?" He leaned in, his voice a low threat. "If you don't do this, Mary, it's over. I'll file for divorce." "Is that what you want?" I recoiled, his words hitting me like a physical blow. The threat of divorce hung in the air, a brutal ultimatum. The day the kids were supposed to arrive felt like the calm before the storm. I watched from the window as Susan's car pulled up. Out tumbled her 3 little ones, each more energetic than the last. Mrs. Thompson, playing the doting grandmother, welcomed them with open arms. The scene was almost comical, a perfect setup for what I had planned. "Mary, darling, could you help with the kids?" Mrs. Thompson called out, her voice saccharine sweet. I plastered a smile on my face, hiding my brewing plan. "Of course, I'll be right there." As I walked into the living room, the chaos was already unfolding. The kids were running around, and Mrs. Thompson looked like she was barely holding it together. "Finally, Mary, I thought you'd never come," she snapped, her kind facade slipping. Alex walked in, his expression a mix of annoyance and relief. "Mary, make sure they don't wreck the place. I'm going to be in my office." I nodded, my heart racing with anticipation. "Actually, I need to go out for a bit. I'll be back soon." Alex's face twisted into a scowl. "Go out? Now? Are you kidding me, Mary? You can't leave us with all this." I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "It's just for a bit, Alex. I need to buy some groceries. You'll manage, won't you?" Mrs. Thompson glared at me. "You're being completely irresponsible, Mary. This is not the time for your little shopping trips." Ignoring her, I grabbed my purse. I won't be long. Keep an eye on the kids. I couldn't help but let out a laugh as I closed the door behind me. The look on their faces was priceless. I didn't go shopping. Instead, I headed straight to the apartment I had rented days before. I had moved all my belongings there when no one was home. It was my escape, my fresh start. Sitting in my new, empty apartment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The laughter, the sense of freedom was exhilarating. I was finally free from their suffocating grip. I knew Alex would find the divorce papers I left in my office. I imagined his shock, his anger, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had taken control of my life again. The phone rang incessantly, messages flooded in: Alex, Mrs. Thompson, even Susan. But I ignored them all. I was done with their drama, their selfishness. That night, I lay in my new bed, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of my former life. I smiled to myself, thinking about Alex and Mrs. Thompson struggling with the kids. It was their turn to feel overwhelmed, to be pushed to their limits. The aftermath of my departure turned out to be more dramatic than any scene from my books. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from various friends who couldn't resist sharing the chaos unfolding at my former residence. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, the phone rang with an all-too-familiar number. It was Alex, and from the background noise, I could tell the situation at home was far from under control. "Mary, you have to come back. These kids are monsters." Alex's voice was desperate, strained with frustration. I could hear the sounds of things crashing and children screaming. A smirk crept onto my face. "Really, Alex? Sounds like you're having a fun time." "This isn't funny, Mary. My mom is losing her mind, and I can't handle this alone," he pleaded. I leaned back, enjoying the sweet taste of retribution. "Well, Alex, you should have thought about that before. I'm not your nanny or your maid." There was a pause, and then he said, "I'm sorry, okay? I should have listened to you, respected your work. Please, just come back." The apology, so rare from Alex, didn't stir any sympathy in me. "Sorry doesn't fix everything, Alex. I told you what would happen. I'm done being taken for granted." I hung up, cutting off his protests. The satisfaction was short-lived, though, replaced by a sense of peace and freedom. A few days later, I met up with Lucy for coffee. "So, I heard Mrs. Thompson called Susan, demanding she come back early to take her kids," Lucy said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. I laughed, sipping my coffee. "Yeah, Susan refused. Said she needed the break. Can you imagine the showdown at that house?" Lucy chuckled. "And your book? It's a hit, Mary. Everyone's talking about it." I smiled, feeling a sense of achievement wash over me. "I put everything into it. It's my best work yet." Lucy leaned in, lowering her voice. "The main villain, she's a lot like your mother-in-law, isn't she?" I raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on my lips. "Is she? I hadn't noticed." As I walked back to my apartment, I thought about the journey I had been on. Leaving Alex and his controlling family was the best decision I had ever made. I was finally living for myself, my dreams. My latest book was just the start. The villain, reminiscent of Mrs. Thompson, was a hit with the readers. My friends saw the resemblance immediately, but for me, it was more than that. It was a cathartic release, a way to close a painful chapter of my life. My name's Lisa. I never expected to walk into that party and find my whole world spun on its axis. But there I was, standing next to Rachel, hoping for a few laughs and free drinks. All it took was his hate to turn an ordinary night upside down. "Rachel, who's that?" I nudged her side, eyeing the guy with the easy smile and hands shoved casually into his jeans pockets. "Oh, that's James," she half shouted over the music, "went to college with him. Real chill guy. You wanna meet him?" "Sure," I shrugged. New faces meant new stories, but nothing prepared me for the instant connection. James had this way of talking like you were the only person in the room. And those green eyes? They didn't hurt either. So, you like the Rolling Stones? He caught me eyeing his t-shirt. Vintage band tees were everywhere, but I actually meant it when I said, only someone who really digs good music would wear Mick Jagger on their chest. He laughed. Are you calling me out or complimenting me? Guess you'll never know, I teased back. We were inseparable by the end of the night. We spoke about everything, from our love for old-school rock to the names we'd pick for our future pets. He got my number and didn't wait the so-called appropriate 3 days to call. He rang me up the next morning. It wasn't long before we were deep in the what-ifs of tomorrow, and it didn't sound crazy to be picking out rings and talking about forever. But forever comes with its own baggage, like it or not. Meeting the parents was on the horizon, I knew that. But nothing prepared me for the icy reception at the dinner table. Margaret, James's mom, was the first to break the so-called ice. So, Lisa, you work at the hospital, right? It wasn't the warmth of polite interest that coded her question, but something harder, like I was being appraised. Yeah, the county hospital, up north, I said as confidently as I could. And how much do they pay you for that? Her eyes were sharp, her tone sharper. I paused, James shot me a look, but I decided to be upfront. Enough to get by. My answer was clipped, I hated talking finances. Well, James does more than get by, she said. I glanced at James, who was calm and silent. I felt my face heat up. So, about this marriage, she continued as if my income was just a segue. A prenup is sensible, don't you think? It was like a punch to the gut. But I said, listen, I don't care about money. But whatever happens, the bit I send to Granny B each month, it's non-negotiable. Fair enough, his dad finally chimed in, that seems reasonable. The tone for this commitment was set, tough, not all sunshine and romance, but it was real. And real was something I could work with. Our wedding could have fit in a matchbox, no fanfare, just him, me, and a couple of signatures that sealed the deal. In the beginning, we were a team, tackling life from our small joint command center, his old house he'd owned for years. We had set up a system, half on everything. When I think about that time, it seemed straightforward. We wrote up a budget, penciled in time for chores, and even cooking was something we did together. There was comfort in the routine, in knowing what to expect when we both got home. He used to count minutes until I got home. We'd link up in the kitchen, not just for the food, but for those moments, you know. It wasn't just about filling our plates, it was about sharing the day, stirring and tasting, and laughing over a shared bottle of wine. But reality is a tough customer. 4 months down the line, and the teamwork was taking hits. The excuses rolled in. At first, it was just a bad day here and there, a boss on his back or a project running him ragged. Babe, I'm beat, he'd say, dropping his bag by the door, not picking up the hints of garlic and basil in the air, the sound of something sizzling on the stove. Gonna crash for a bit. You mind finishing up? I didn't at first. Everyone's entitled to a bad day, right? But bad days started to string together like some lousy pearl necklace, each excuse shinier than the last. One night, I found him sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to some game on the TV. The floor was a maze of his work stuff, and the sink was an overstuffed exhibition of dirty dishes. Honey, the kitchen's blowing up, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You were supposed to handle it tonight. He gave me this quick glance, one of those, just a sec looks before focusing back on the players running across the screen. Yeah, I'll get to it. Just let me watch this play, he muttered, not moving an inch. But the plays went on, one after the other, and the kitchen stayed a mess. The tension was simmering, ready to boil over. Look, I don't need plays, I need a partner, I snapped, surprising myself a bit with the sharp edge in my voice. Chill, all right? It's just dishes, he shot back, his attention still on the game. We clashed like this, more and more. Those simple knots we tied at the mayor's office started to feel like some complex puzzles, impossible to solve. He retreated into his shell, all but locking me out. The split down the middle started to shift, what was meant to be equal began to weigh heavy on my side. Chores piled up, just like his excuses. That shared life we were supposed to be building felt more like a solo gig. 2 weeks of slugging it out on my own and I finally snapped. I never was one to kick up a fuss, but who could live like this? I cornered James as he walked through the door, oblivious with his headphones on. "James," I blurted out, unable to hide the annoyance in my tone, "what happened to sharing the load?" He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head, pulling off his headphones. "What are you on about, Lisa?" he asked, genuinely confused or a damn good actor. "I spent nearly an hour scraping your dried up yogurt off the coffee table this morning. It's like living with a toddler." He just shrugged. That bloody shrug, like he didn't have a care in the world. "Chill out, will you? It's just a bit of mess." A bit of mess, he called it. So, I left his mess, stopped picking up his dirty socks, stopped doing his laundry. Petty? Sure, but I was at breaking point. Of course, that's when Margaret, his mother, decided to pop in unannounced. The perfect storm. "Look at this place," she said, her nose crinkled as if she'd just found a rotten egg under her seat. I tried to keep cool, offered her a cup of tea, but she was on the warpath. "James, this is no way for a man to live," she said sternly, eyes fixed on me. "I didn't raise you to be living in a pigsty." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Margaret, it's a two-person job, and I've been doing it solo. I'm not his maid." "You're his wife," she snapped back. "And a wife keeps a clean home." I felt my face flush with anger. "And what does a husband do, Margaret?" I snapped back. "He's the breadwinner," she hollered back, missing the irony that I too had a full-time job. Margaret threw her hands up in the air and turned to James. "You're soft on her," she declared, as if I wasn't there. My Harold would have never stood for this nonsense. I wanted to tell her where Harold could stick it, but I held back. No point in making things nastier. Margaret stormed out, slamming the door with such force the family photos rattled against the wall. Now it was just me and James, standing in the rubble of our domestic battlefield. So James got knocked down a notch at work. He came home that day, dumped his keys like they were made of lead. "They're cutting back," he said, the words hung heavy in the air. "I'm off the management track." Just like that, he decides he's not gonna help with the bills no more. Suddenly, it's all on me. I was smacking pots and pans like they owed me money. The noise must have finally got to him. "Why are you making such a racket?" he asked, picking at his beer label. "Because someone's gotta pay for those beers," I snapped. "And keep this place looking half decent." What came next was like a round in the ring. "You expect me to chip in after a day like today?" he shot back. "Yeah, James," I said, not backing down an inch. "Because I had a cakewalk of a day, right?" He didn't have a comeback for that. Just took another swig. "We had a deal. We share this, remember?" I said. James sat there, TV blaring, as if I wasn't even there. "A deal doesn't hold when things go south," he said, not even looking at me. I stood in front of the screen. "So, what? I'm supposed to just smile and nod and keep the house like some 1950s sitcom mom?" He just glared at me then, no love there, only irritation. "You wanted a partnership, here it is. This is life, deal with it." The words hung there, thick and toxic. His ignoring the problem wasn't going to make it vanish. We're supposed to be in this together. And that means not ditching out when it gets tough. I didn't ditch out. The job did. I wanted to shout, to yell, to make him see sense, but I knew it wouldn't get through. Instead, I let out a cold, hard laugh. "Good, and I'll do what?" I'm not your maid, and I'm not an ATM. We'll see how long that lasts, he muttered, barely audible over the din of the TV. I turned off the TV. We'll see how long we last if this is how it's gonna be. Silence filled the room, thick as the dirt I'd been cleaning all day. He looked away. I stormed off to bed. No more words that night, none that mattered anyhow. They were all bitter, all spat out with hurt more than real heart, but they stuck with me, like thorns in my side. The tension in the house was like walking into a wall of ice. Barely a word was passed between us without a sharp edge. James had taken to eating his meals alone, meals that Margaret dropped off with a thud at our door. I could hear the plastic containers hitting the wood, like the gavel of a judge passing sentence. "So, what are we having tonight?" I asked, poker-faced, as James marched past me, Margaret's cooking in hand. "Does it matter?" He barely glanced my way. "It's not like you're eating." It was true. I didn't have the stomach for food, not for what was in those containers. It was more than lasagna or stew, it was a heavy dose of rejection, served up by Margaret, and it had seeped into every room of the house. Then Granny B called. Cheerful and active, I could almost smell her lavender perfume through the phone. A visit from Granny could turn a place upside down, and that's what I sorely needed. A gust of fresh air. "I'm packing my bags, baby girl," she chuckled, but I heard the steel underneath. A will that had gotten her through tougher times than this. "I need to see your life." I broached the subject over dinner, a silent affair, with the clinking of cutlery replacing conversation. "Granny B wants to visit," I said, dropping the bomb without preamble. James paused mid-chew, his eyes hardening. "Here? Stay with us?" I nodded, gripping my fork like a lifeline. He shook his head, speaking with his mouth full like he suddenly forgot manners existed. "No chance. Margaret wouldn't like it." "Since when do we schedule our life around your mother?" The boldness of my words surprised even me. Margaret's voice sliced through from the doorway. "Since it's our house, girl. You just live here." The unfairness of it choked me like a noose. "Your son and I are supposed to be building a life together, Margaret." She snorted. "A life? You call this a life? Look at you two. I bring him food because someone needs to take care of my boy." James stood up, his chair scraping back like a scream. "And that's how it's gonna be. No visits. No changes. It's settled." I looked between them, the mother and son, and I felt it, the outsider tag slapping against my chest. "It's settled, because you say so? What about what I want, what I need?" "You need to understand that things are the way they are," James shot back, red, flushing his cheeks. "My house, my rules." The ache spread from my heart to my fingertips, but I squared my shoulders. "It's also my home, James. Or at least it's supposed to be." James had no answer, just the hard line of his jaw telling me the conversation was over. But nothing was settled. Granny B would come, somehow, I'd make sure of it. For the first time, I wanted the battleground. If they wouldn't budge, neither would I. There was fight in me yet, and the freeze in the house would need my fire to thaw it, whether they liked it or not. For the third month in a row, James did not contribute his share to our family budget. I was carrying everything, the house, the groceries, and even his damn beer. We had a fight. That fight had been the last straw. James and I stood, facing each other, our words sharp enough to slice through steel. The room felt smaller as the tension grew, air thick with resentments saved up from months of silent battles and unspoken words. "I don't want you as my wife," James said, his voice dripping with that finality I knew was the end of everything. It didn't come out as a shout. That might have been better, a shout I could have responded to with fury. Instead, it was a low hiss, a deflating tire's last breath, leaving behind silence that echoed louder than any scream. I gathered what was left of my dignity. "Fine," I countered with as much steadiness as I could muster, despite the tremor I felt within. "I don't want to be where I'm not wanted." He didn't stop me as I started to pack my bags. Each piece of clothing folded felt like a piece of the life we'd built being tucked away, rendered insignificant. I headed to the door, my suitcase a loyal companion trailing behind me. James was still standing in the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm that had hit us over and over until we'd broken, pieces scattered beyond collection. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me. The door closed with a click much too gentle for the ending it represented. Outside, Granny B was in her old, dependable car that smelled of leather and peppermint, leaning over to open the passenger door. I heaped my suitcase into the back and slid in beside her without a word. "All set, dear?" Granny asked, her eyes soft but her voice strong, a rock in a swirling sea. "Yeah, I'm set," I mumbled, buckling the seatbelt over the hollow feeling in my chest. Granny B didn't start the car right away. "He's a fool," she said flatly, adding an expletive that would have made a sailor blush. I choked out a strained chuckle. "Granny!" "Well, it's true." She finally turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life reassuringly. "You're worth 10 of him. 15, even." She backed out and we started towards the new apartment. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape blur, the same way my thoughts were a jumble of memories and pain. Granny B didn't push with questions or platitudes. She just drove, every now and then muttering something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like curses aimed at James. The cozy rented apartment was in a normal neighborhood, a place where you could blend in and lick your wounds in peace. As Granny hauled my bag out of the car with surprising strength, I unlocked the door to the unknown. "Well," Granny said, clapping her hands together, "time to rebuild, kiddo. You've got a life to claim and that sorry excuse of a man to forget." I nodded, feeling the very first flutter of something like hope in my chest. Breaking points, I realized, weren't just about endings. They were about beginnings, too, messy, painful, but real. Fresh starts didn't erase the past, but they gave you a canvas to create something new. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Granny B was sitting on my threadbare couch, her hands clasped over her knee, bouncing with what seemed like contained energy. Who knew that beneath that floral dress and the wrinkles was a woman with the heart of a Wall Street hustler? "So you're telling me, all the dough I sent you for your meds and stuff, you've been playing the market with it?" I stared at her in disbelief. Granny B chuckled and winked. "Honey, you think I'd let your hard-earned cash rot under a mattress? No way. I've been growing it, bit by bit." I was flabbergasted. It felt unreal. I crunched the divorce papers in my hand, knowing that what Granny B had just told me was going to flip the script in a major way. James and Margaret, the perfect couple from next door, agreed to meet us one last time. Probably thought they could offer me some friendly advice on starting over. Margaret opened the door, all fake smiles. "Well, if it isn't the soon-to-be single lady. Come in, we were just talking about you." James sat at the dining table, smirking without a care in the world. "Good of you to come by. We need to talk about the neighborhood, now that you'll probably be moving somewhere more, affordable." I clenched my jaw but remembered Granny's news. I needed this. "Actually, James, I won't be going anywhere." Granny B piped up. "She's got a juicy bit of news. Tell hon." I enjoyed the suspense stretching their faces tight. Turns out I got a little nest egg waiting for me. Granny's been smart with the money. James laughed, harsh and loud. "What? Did you win the lottery or something?" Granny B grinned, sharp as a tack. "Better." I turned her spare change into a cool 2 mil. The smiles fell off James and Margaret's faces like overripe fruit. 2 million? Margaret's voice came out strangled. "Yep, and I don't plan to spend it on this neighborhood." My words felt heavy as I watched their painted-on warmth crumble. Granny slapped a hand on her thigh, triumphant. "Ain't that something? Just when you think life's kicked you, it decides to kiss you instead." James started babbling something about how half of this money belongs to him. I burst out laughing, reminding him of the prenuptial agreement I had signed. I swear, at this moment, his mother would like to go back 6 months to destroy this paper. James and Margaret sat in silence, looking at us with puppy dog eyes. I couldn't help but relish the irony. We didn't linger much longer, there was nothing left to say. As we walked out, Granny B draped an arm around my shoulders. "So, what's first on the millionaire to-do list?" she asked, squeezing me tight. "First, I'm getting an ice cream. A big one. With all the fixings," I said, the future suddenly bright and wide open. Granny let out a hearty laugh, the sound mingling with the promise of an unseen fortune, now seen, and closer than ever. The phone rang again. I was pretty sure it was James trying his luck once more, but this time, it went straight to voicemail. I had stuff to sort out and no desire to entertain that mess. I heaved a sigh, looking around my cramped apartment cluttered with memories, too many of them pinned to James, and a shadow that loomed like a bad smell. Grandma, with her sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, was right as rain. "Why do you even keep that thing on?" Grandma gestured at the phone with a scoff, busy shuffling through a pile of real estate listings. Shrugged, I tossed the phone on the couch. "Guess I'm too soft." "Squishy as overripe tomato," she snorted. "We need to get movin'. I don't want James or his mama knockin' on our door, trying to weasel back into our lives when we've barely shucked 'em off." "I know, Grams. Thanks." I flashed her a grateful look. "So, where to?" She slapped a listing onto the kitchen table. It was circled in bold. "Here. 2 bedrooms, cleaner air, away from unwanted pests." I skimmed the details. "Looks decent, Grams. Any pizza joints nearby?" The next day dawned fresh. We were off, the apartment ad in hand and a skip in Grandma's step. The listing agent met us at the property, all smiles and slicked back hair, reeking of too much aftershave. "Welcome, ladies." He extended his hand right at Grandma. She eyed it like it was a dead fish, but shook it all the same. "Cut to the chase, hotshot. We're not here for pleasantries." I bit back a laugh as the agent's smile twitched. Of course, of course." He quickly unlocked the door. "This way, please." The place was a gem compared to where we were. Good light, clean floors, and the air didn't hold any of James' cologne. Grandma haggled like she was born in a market stall. The price dropped. Terms changed. By the time we walked out, the agent looked 2 inches shorter. The move went smooth. Neighbors were quick to say hi, a couple of them inviting us over for beers and a barbecue. Asked about my story, but I kept it simple. I was done letting my past hitch a ride. The new place shaped up nice. I continued to work as a nurse. Grandma found her corner for knitting and gossiping with Mrs. Hem from next door, who had more sass packed in her tiny frame than anyone I'd ever met. One evening, I grabbed a pizza, from the new joint, of course, and headed home. As I flipped open the box, the steam carried that cheesy aroma up, and I couldn't help but smile. And so we settled in, me and Grandma, our little team. The taste of fresh starts and thick crust pizza in the air, laughter from the neighbor's yard spilling in through our open window, and a sense of peace finally making itself at home. James and his empty promises faded into the background noise, just like the buzz of the city we'd left behind. I was looking forward, and the view was pretty damn good. Hi, I'm Lily Donovan, and this is my story or whatever. My family's been a bit of a mess since forever. Got a sister, Ellie, who's sort of like the crown jewel at home because of her bad heart. Our mom, yeah, she's fixated on Ellie. With Ellie being born sickly, she got extra eyes on her, extra care. Mom was always shadowing her, making sure she was breathing okay, eating right, or was warm enough. Almost like I'm part of the furniture. Anyway, Dad was different. He was my champ. When I needed something, he was my go-to. He'd listen, not just nod along, but actually listen. Ellie, though, she got all the attention without even trying, and the drama, tons of it. Take one morning at the breakfast table for example. I was on my second cup of coffee, flipping through some job listings. Dad was at the other end, eyeing the sports section like it had the meaning of life tucked in there. Then in breezes Ellie, all theatrics, like she's about to drop some Shakespearean tragedy on us. So, the doc says my heart's acting up again, Ellie says, all breathless and expecting a scene. Mom's up from her seat like someone lit a fire under her, asking, "What does that mean, hon? You feeling okay? You need anything?" Ellie, "Nah, I'm fine. But the vacation's off. Doctor's orders." Dad stops looking at his paper and goes, "That's rough, kiddo." Me, I'm just silent. Because what's there to say? Every little thing about Ellie's sickness tosses our family into chaos. But before I can even shrug, Mom's looking at me with those eyes. You know the type, like I've suddenly kicked a puppy by being quiet. And out of nowhere, I decide to toss in my 2 cents, maybe it's not the end of the world, right? Mom almost jumps at me. "Lily, can't you see your sister's struggling?" Ellie just slurps her juice, watching the show. I shrug. Just saying. There's worse stuff out there, ain't there? Ellie puts her glass down and says, "Nice, sis. Real supportive." Dad finally puts down the paper like he's about to referee a boxing match. "Ease up on your sister, Ellie." But Mom ain't having it, she can at least act like she cares. I push back from the table, this is the same old song and dance. I tell them straight, "Look, Ellie plays sick and we all gotta dance. I'm sick of it." Literally. Ellie's eyes go all wide like she can't believe I'd say that, but come on, it's been the story of my life. Dad gets that I'm fed up, and tries to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. But I've already grabbed my jacket. Walking out, I toss over my shoulder, "I'll be back when the drama's done." You can bet they had a lot to say after I left, but honestly, for once, it was nice not to hear it. Dad understood, Mom was pissed, and Ellie, well, Ellie was Ellie. That's family for you. My sights were set on college, it was my out. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about getting somewhere. Grades had been my weapon of choice, and I wielded them well. I scored a ticket to a good school, a scholarship to boot. Ellie, despite everything, made it to college too, though it was clear her path there was marked by a different set of expectations. She was out to prove something, but I still wasn't quite sure what. "You gotta aim high, Lil," Dad said once as we cleared plates, his hand landing heavy and sure on my shoulder. "Don't let anyone dim your lights, hear me?" "Yeah, Dad. I hear ya." I smiled, tucking those words close. It was the quiet fuel I needed. To soar. To escape. To be more than just Lily Donovan, sister to the kid with the weak heart, daughter to a mother with uneven scales. College was a different world. I had my nose in the books, pushing hard to make something of myself. Ellie, she just couldn't hack it. She was lost, floundering in seminars and lectures, like she was trying to read a map with no legend. She dropped the news on me like a bomb, the tinny voice from my cell speaker signaling surrender. "College ain't my jam, Lily," Ellie said, her words lackluster. "I'm dropping out." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, multitasking between the call and my constitutional law textbook. "You're bailing? Just like that? Got better things lined up than being a brain like you," she snapped back. There was a heavy dose of her trademark venom in her voice. The same one that could turn from sweetie to serpent in a single sentence. "So, what? You're skipping off into the sunset with the first guy who bats an eye?" I snorted. "Exactly," she hissed. "Someone's gotta live a little while you bury yourself in those dusty books. Wouldn't want to die alone with cats as my only company." I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Ellie could never resist a jab. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in the back of a dimly lit church, law book hidden in my lap, as Ellie strutted down the aisle. She had nabbed herself a husband before she'd even figured out who she was. It was like she was playing life's game without bothering to learn the rules. After the I do's, she swanned over with her glass raised, smirking like she'd won some sort of race. Cheers to me, the married woman, and to you, Lily, maybe you'll graduate to cat lady soon? She snickered, cruelty wrapped in a toast. I bit back the anger, knowing Ellie relished any sign of getting under my skin. Maybe, but at least I'll have a law degree to hang on the wall. Cats or not. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're better than me, with your big dreams of being a hotshot lawyer? As she flittered away to go cut the cake, a part of me wanted to scream. I wanted to shake some sense into her. But I stayed in my seat, the anger simmering. Back on campus, I poured myself more into my studies. The late nights were my fortress from Ellie's barbed comments. Every essay, every exam was another brick in my walls, fortifying my future against her cynicism. Ellie and I were on divergent paths, she, reveling in the now with a sharp tongue, and I, building a foundation for tomorrow with gritted teeth. That was just the way of it. You can't pick your family. But you sure as hell can pick which of their words to listen to. And Ellie's? I was learning to let them go like seeds in the wind, insignificant and unworthy of taking root. Turning 30 hit different. The job at Uncle John's law firm was steady. Every day in court was like a chess game. I'd become good at it, keeping my cool under those fluorescent lights. Mark and I had been an item since who knows when. We figured, why not make it official? So we planned to. Dad's been gone a while now. I don't bring it up much. Stuff happened, he's not here, we move on. That means I've kind of been both the rock and the hard place for myself. When I said to Mom and Ellie, hey, I'm marrying Mark in a bit, they just shrugged. That's nice, Mom said without looking up from her cards. Ellie? She couldn't even pause her TV show. I heard her mumble a congrats, buried under a heap of reality show noise and screams of her children. Where is her husband Dave? He was almost never at home. Living with Uncle John's sometimes biting sense of legal wisdom wasn't much different. I'd tell him about the upcoming wedding and he'd just grunt. You sure about the prenup? Romance isn't exactly our family style. So here I am, 2 weeks out, and it's all about the bare minimum. I want a quiet do. Some folks would take Mom and Sis ignoring the whole deal like a punch. I take it like a typical Tuesday. No help? No problem. It's just Mark and me, and that's plenty. I draft my own contracts by day, iron out merge clauses, and at night, I scroll through potential honeymoon spots on my phone. No fluff, just picking a place to unwind. After the case I just cracked, I need it. Weddings bring out strange in folks, I guess. Mom suddenly caught up with her bridge club, acting like playing cards is her full-time job. I dropped by to give her an update on the no-fuss dress I picked, not that she asked. She barely glances up, don't stress. It'll be fine. Full house. I should have knocked. Cool, Mom, I say, but I'm talking to the wall, because she's dealing cards again. Ellie's the same. She calls, and it's one crisis after another. I can't find a dress, she complains over the phone. Ellie, just wear something from your closet. She huffs like I've suggested hiking the Everest in flip-flops. Fine, she snaps. I go about my days, bits and pieces of the wedding falling together between deposition prep and client consultations. Mark's doing his share, but mostly he's just keeping me sane. Always a joke ready to diffuse my stress like a bomb squad pro. I handle the indifferences from Mom and Ellie the same way I manage everything else, with a little nod and a lot of getting on with it. It's like being in the eye of my own personal hurricane, watching all the whirlwinds, but not really feeling them. I've gotten good at it, too good maybe. In the end, it's simple. I'm not walking down the aisle to make a statement. It isn't a parade or a show. It's just signing papers, making things official, a modest gather-up for a lifetime of more down-to-earth moments with Mark. He's the I do at the end of my very practical, very organized checklist. As for Mom and Ellie, well, they'll show up or they won't. The wedding will happen, and then life will roll on. It always does. I was mid-sentence with a contractor, haggling over the price of folding chairs, when Mom's call threw everything off balance. Her voice, usually as steady as a metronome, was all over the place, like a needle jumping grooves on a record. "Honey, Ellie's been left by her husband, with 2 kids," she said, and I could almost picture her hand fluttering to her chest, the way she does when the latest gossip hits. I was so stunned I almost dropped the phone. "What? You're joking." "No, dear. I wish I were. She's a mess. We're all in shock. It's just, would you consider postponing?" I bristled at the notion, felt that stubborn streak flare up. "Postpone? Mom, I've got a timetable tighter than a drum here. You know that." "But Ellie is going to have to deal with her own mess," I cut in, with an edge that said the discussion was closed. But Mom wasn't done. "She needs us, needs family. Maybe it's not a good time for a wedding?" I scoffed. "And when is it ever a good time, huh? Look, I'm sorry for Ellie, but life doesn't stop. Mine doesn't, at least." I turned to Mark, who had witnessed the tail end of the call, his eyebrows doing a high-wire act. "What now?" he asked, towing the line between concern and asking for the mess report. "Ellie's husband ditched her. Mom wants us to push back the wedding." His eyes widened slightly. "Wow. Are we?" I shook my head. "No way. We've bent over backward for this family enough." He nodded, his hand finding my shoulder, a silent signal of support. "All right. But you okay with that?" I took a deep breath, somewhere between frustration and determination. "Hell yes. It's our turn, Mark. We've done the waiting, the pleasing. Remember?" "I remember," he said, that low voice steady as ever. "It's just family is." I raised a hand. "Don't say complicated. It's overrated." Mark chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "All right, tough cookie. You call the shots." A mix of guilt and relief swirled in me, but I pushed it down. I had enough on my plate without adding second helpings of pity for Ellie. Life ensued. I went back to ticking off checkboxes, ignoring the clawing feeling that comes with not being the good guy. Or in this case, the good sister. The day didn't start off great, and I could tell it was only destined to nosedive from there. Mark was trying to steer clear of any drama, but somehow, we wound up accepting the dinner invite at Mom's place. "Just a family get-together," she'd said. But I knew better. As soon as we walked in, the air was heavy, kinda like walking into a wall. Mom had this stern look plastered on her face, and Ellie, my sister, she was already a few glasses in, eyes red and puffy like she's been crying or something. I barely got my coat off before Ellie slurred out, "Lily, you gotta understand." Her voice wobbled like one of those wacky inflatable arm guys outside a car dealership. "I'm going through hell, and there you are parading your happiness around." She clutched at her heart out of habit. "But we all know that she is absolutely healthy now, her childhood illness has sunk into oblivion." Stiffening up, I shot back, "Ellie, it's not like that, and you know it. Stop playing the victim." Mark put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to ease up, but I was past fed up. Mom chimed in then, voice cold as ice. "Lily, we're just asking for a little compassion. Is that too much?" I could feel the temperature drop with her every word. Still, Mark and I, we were a united front. "We've planned this for a year," Mark said, his firmness a surprise even to me. "It's not just Lily's call, it's mine too, and we're not postponing." Mom gave us a hard look, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ungrateful," she hissed at me. "After all we've done for you." I snorted, narrowed my eyes. "Ungrateful? Really? For what, exactly?" That's when Mom dropped the real bomb, her voice a mix of fury and something that sounded like a twisted form of caring. If you can't cancel your wedding, then at least skip your honeymoon. Stay and watch your nieces and nephews. Give your sister a break to travel, let her heal. Mark snorted, disbelief coloring his chuckle. Are you serious right now? We're supposed to give up our honeymoon for Ellie's getaway? Ellie stood up, swaying a little as she leaned across the table with a sneer. Yeah, 'cause why should you be happy if I'm not? I stood up too, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Enough, Ellie. Life doesn't stop for you. I'm getting married, and I'm going on my honeymoon. End of discussion. Mom stared at us, eyes flinty. If you walk out that door, Lily, don't bother coming back. And if I stay, what? I get guilt-tripped and walked over my entire life? I snapped, already heading for the door. Mark was right behind me. Neither of us looked back, even as the door slammed shut with a sound that said more clearly than any words could, the line was drawn. It was us against them, and I was done playing by their crazy rules. I was knee-deep in Tool and Good Wishes when Uncle John's number lit up my phone. Ain't this the time when you're supposed to be getting pampered or something? Was his gruff opener when I answered. Yeah, well, you know how it goes, I replied, half laughing, despite the frustrations nipping at my heels. You got a minute? He asked. His voice had that no-nonsense edge to it that I remembered from when I was a kid. Sure, lay it on me, I said, stepping out onto the venue's balcony for some privacy. It's about your mom's latest request, Uncle John started, and I braced myself. Listen, kiddo, she tried to strong-arm me to cancel your vacation. No vacation, no honeymoon, says it's what family does, supports each other and all that jazz. I felt my hands clench around the phone. Is that right? I managed to say, trying to keep the ice out of my voice. Yeah, but don't worry, I told her where to shove it, Uncle John replied, and I could almost hear him spitting the words out. Uncle Jay, you didn't have to get involved, I said, the gratitude and stress mixing up inside me. I'll fight your corner any day. This is your time. You and Mark deserve to enjoy all of it, without any crap thrown your way. I just can't believe she's trying to ruin my wedding and break my honeymoon, I said, rubbing my temple. Stubborn as a mule, that sister of mine, he chuckled, but it was that kind of laugh that didn't reach the eyes. Anyway, I've got your back. You two just focus on tying the knot and then getting naughty on your own time, if you catch my drift. I laughed, a real laugh this time. Couldn't have said it better myself, Uncle. Course you couldn't. I'm the family wordsmith, he said, his voice proud as a peacock. Then he lowered it a notch. Remember, kiddo, you're doing nothing wrong. Go, get married, be happy. I promised I would and hung up, feeling a notch lighter, but with the weight of the whole situation still sitting on my chest like an unwelcome cat. The rehearsal dinner was buzzing when I got back. Mark caught my eye across the room and frowned when he saw my face. Everything okay? He mouthed. I nodded and made my way through a sea of relatives and friends, plastering on a smile like it was lipstick. Mark met me halfway, his hands finding mine, his eyes searching my face. You're worrying me, he said. It was Uncle John. Mom's trying to recruit him into her save the date but screw the honeymoon campaign. I sighed, feeling the whole thing splayed out again. He snorted. She's relentless. Like a dog with a bone, I agreed. But Uncle John's not biting. I swear, he's the only one actually standing up for us. Well, we've got each other. That's the main thing, Mark replied, and wrapped me in a hug that felt like armor against the world's crazy. The murmur of family and friends bubbled around us, all unsuspecting of the undercurrents they were swimming in. The table settings gleamed, glasses clinked, and laughter soared like fireflies in the evening light. As I lay down that night, with the stars wearing their best shine outside my window, I could only hope that our next chapter would be written on the bright side of this often too-shadowed world. Mark's steady breathing in the dark was a promise and question all at once, it didn't matter what came next. His yes matched my yes, and that felt like the only answer we'd ever need. After what they tried to pull off, Mom and my sister said they wouldn't be caught dead at my wedding. They made sure everyone knew it too, telling anyone who'd listen that I was just a cold piece of work. They didn't stop there, though. They started spreading all sorts of nonsense around town about me, but you know what? It didn't matter one bit. The big day came, and it was nothing short of awesome. Our family and friends filled the place up, there were so many of them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, laughing and joking around. It was loud, and it was fun, and nobody brought up Mom and Sis. It was like we all agreed not to let them ruin the vibe. My bridesmaids were a whirlwind of activity. Girl, are those butterflies in your stomach? Or just the 2 bottles of champagne we guzzled? Lisa, always the joker, nudged me with her elbow as she adjusted my veil for the 100th time. Just excitement, I guess? I replied, my smile as wide as the horizon. Well, you look banging. Jen chimed in, her hands making tiny adjustments to my bouquet. Mark's gonna fall over when he sees you. The ceremony space was filled with the tunes of a string quartet digging into my favorite classics, nothing fancy, just raw music that filled the soul. Damn, can you believe you're about to get hitched? Lisa sighed, her tough tone softened a touch by the moment. Believe it? I planned it, down to the last petal. I laughed as I peeked through the crack of the door at the guests filtering in. The ceremony was a blur of words and emotions. When it came time to exchange vows, Mark's voice filled the room. I promised to keep it real, to be your partner in crime, to have your back, and make you laugh when life sucks. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking just a little. I promised to always be honest, to support your crazy schemes, to love you even when you leave your socks on the floor. The room erupted into laughter and cheers, the love tangible in the air like the warmth of the spring sun coming through the windows. As husband and wife, you may now kiss the bride, the officiant announced, and Mark wasted no time. It was the kind of kiss that said we were in this for the long haul, for better, for worse, and hell, even for the mundane. Later, as the party wound down, Uncle John found me, his face a little shiny from the festivities. You did good, kid. And if anyone gives you trouble, you send them my way. I will, Uncle Jay, thanks for everything, I said, meaning every word. As the night drew to a close, and the last stragglers left, Mark and I stood hand in hand, taking in the moment. Ready to start this adventure? He asked, squeezing my hand. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I replied, and we stepped out into the cool night air. We climbed into the car, cans clattering behind us, a playful, just married sign taped to the back. I looked over at Mark, his face illuminated by the streetlights as we drove away. This is it, he said, his hand finding mine. This is us, I said, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. My new hubby and I took off to this cozy beach spot for our honeymoon. Just us, the sun, and the sea. It was like a week-long chill pill. And nope, I did not call Mom or Sis. Not once. And I didn't miss them either. Yeah, family's supposed to be your rock, right? But sometimes, you gotta build your own foundation. That's what I did, and it's solid. I don't need that kind of crazy in my life, and I'm not about to invite it back in. Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up when I walked into a room. Now, I'm lucky if I get a grunt before he buries his nose back into his phone. His job's the same, maybe even less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. Another painting, Grace? What's that, the third this week? Mark's voice would grip the air, sharp and sneering whenever he watched me set up my easel. He used to admire my work, even had my best piece framed in his office once. Not anymore. Yeah, so? It's not like I'm spending your money, I'd answer, trying not to let him see the tremble in my hands, keeping my focus on mixing the blues and yellows on my palette. But inside, each word he volleyed felt like a punch. Could have fooled me. And look at this place. Looks like a damn tornado hit it. He'd scan the room, his eyes scanning every toy and blanket out of place, holding them up like evidence of my failures. Look, I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful. I'd fight back, my voice not as steady as I'd liked. And maybe if you helped a little around here. Help? With what? You're home all the time, you deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the cash, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage. He'd cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same, with him turning away and dismissing me with a scoff. When he left for work, Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes confused. "Daddy mad?" she would ask, her tiny lips quivering at the thought. "No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. Here, help Mommy choose the colors, yeah?" I'd pull her into my arms, trying to smile for her sake, guiding her hand to pick out colors. Together, we'd paint, and for a while, the bitterness in Mark's tone would get drowned out by her laughter and our shared world of color. I knew my paintings were good, not because I was full of myself, but because they were the only thing I had left from a time when I felt confident, vibrant. That evening, when Mark came home, I did what I always did. I tried to greet him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily squeaky from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. "Hey," I said, the smell of roast chicken trailing behind me. "How was your day?" He grunted in reply, shrugging off his coat and throwing it over the couch. His eyes caught mine, then the easel set up in the corner of our living room. "Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, huh?" "It's not junk, Mark. I'm working on something," I responded, the weariness seeping through. "Looks like a waste of time. And money. You could be doing something productive, you know." He walked past me to the fridge, not waiting for an answer. Productive seemed to mean anything that made money or made his life easier. I wasn't doing either to his liking, I guessed. "I am doing something," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'm raising our daughter and keeping our home. And I'm trying to hang on to something that matters to me. My painting matters to me, Mark." He didn't even pause, just popped open a beer and drank deeply. "Call it what you want, Grace. To me? Looks like you're just filling time, making a mess I'll have to pay someone to clean up." I felt the sting. Not from the unkindness of the words, I was getting used to that, but from the dismissal of my dreams, my passion. There wasn't a place for them in Mark's world anymore. "Dinner's ready," I called out, in what felt like a weekly performance, standing with quivering hands as I served the meal. Mark's parents, seated like judges at the head of the table, barely noticed my effort to create a warm, hearty meal. Their eyes were fixed on the easel by the window. "What's this then?" Mark's dad, George, a broad man with a voice that filled the room, jabbed a finger towards my unfinished painting. "Oh, that's just something Grace has been fooling around with," Mark chuckled, waving a dismissive hand before taking his seat. "Real high-class stuff, right?" Laughter rang out, and it twitched at my nerves, laughter that didn't reach their eyes. My, we're an artist now, are we?" chimed in Mark's mom, Patricia, her voice a kind of sharp that could slice steel. "Why don't you show us your latest masterpiece, dear?" George bellowed, his smile more of a challenge than a gesture of interest. I stood, rooted to the spot, feeling the flush spread up my neck. "It's not done yet," I muttered, but Mark was already striding over to the canvas, grabbing it with less care than he'd take with a dish towel. "Look at this, folks," Mark laughed, flipping the canvas around like he was Vanna White revealing a letter on Wheel of Fortune. "It's supposed to be a landscape, can you believe it?" George's laughter bloomed loud again. "Looks like a blind dog's nightmare." Patricia tooted, shaking her head, her nostrils flaring with each chortle. "Why waste your time with this hobby? Get a job or do something, anything, productive." As if any place would hire her, Mark snorted, setting the painting back with a thud that made my heart sink. "The job market's tough out there, and well, look at her." I swallowed, hard. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I do plenty. I take care of Lily, and this house, and… My words faltered under their collective stare. Patricia poked at the food with her fork as if she suspected it was poisoned. Taking care of your family is the least you can do, she sniffed, but honestly, Mark, if you'd married someone with a little ambition. They went on, tearing strips off me with every word, while I just stood there. The room closed in, their words pressing on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt myself slipping away, becoming smaller, insignificant in this grand performance of theirs. Something in me snapped. As soon as the meal ended, with a fake tremor in my voice, I excused myself, marched up the stairs, not looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. Grace? Mark's voice climbed up the stairs, maybe half an hour later, cracking through the door. You coming back down? We need to clear the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would have come out, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing my break. I scrolled through my bank app, a frown etching deeper lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes, too. She was sprouting like a weed. Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 for Martin's art supplies? Just picked up a few things, I said, tapping through the app to transfer what remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed them. Needed? Come on, Grace. That's money we could have put towards something important, isn't it? His voice was flat, bored even, with a hint of something else. Was it disappointment, frustration? I sighed. Art is important to me, Mark. The same way your golf is important to you. I didn't mention the fact that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. Yeah, but golf is networking, it's part of my job. What does your painting get us? A cluttered house and wasted cash, he said, grumbling. It gets me through the day, I murmured, feeling that old, familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Mark snorted. Through the day? We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. Budget. That word felt like a choke chain. I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark. The money I had before. I trailed off, not wanting another fight. My before was a long-gone chapter, one that contained a job, independence, and a once-shared dream of my own gallery. Your money's our money, isn't it? He shot back, the insinuation that my financial independence was history, clear in his tone. And that your money is running out fast. What then? Later at the store, I chose the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. With the rest, I bought the smallest tubes of paint, the ones I could slip into the cart without raising eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, every item a testament to our tightrope walk above financial ruin. Putting back some luxuries, are we? Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. Yes, tightening the belt, I answered without looking at him, hiding the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He hummed, rummaging through the bags like an investigator looking for a slip-up. Where are the Greek yogurts you like? And isn't this the cheap coffee? I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up. Had to make some cuts. Don't see any cuts in your art budget, though, he said, a cold finger pointing out the new brushes I'd slipped under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fist around the countertop to stop the shake in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, eh? He nodded towards the brushes, his words deliberate, biting. That night, I painted not out of passion, but frustration. Each stroke was a challenge, a cut from our personal budget to fit it within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings when he decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding like he was already out the door before he even finished his sentence. Grace, you gotta pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay, do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding distracted. Hang on, you want something nice, but I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way. Make it happen, Grace. And with that cheery little line, he was gone. I let out a long, slow breath, closing my eyes and trying to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. Didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would knock Clara's socks off. No pressure, right? After a deep dive into Clara's online world, it was clear she had a thing for art. Her feed was full of gallery visits, pictures of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even had photos with artists, talked about supporting the arts, patronage and all that jazz. An idea sparked, and I grabbed it before it could blaze out of my mind. A painting, from me. I had the paints. I had the canvas. I sure as hell had the motive. I'd give Clara something no one else could, not off some high street. I spun the idea in my mind, letting it settle. I could picture the brush strokes already, feel the drag of bristles against canvas. It would be personal, and it'd be free. Bonus. A painting, then. Decision made. I was going to need every minute of every day if it was going to look anything like the kind of stuff Clara posted. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work. All the while, fingers crossed that my little slice of creativity would cut it in the high-stakes world of business birthday gifts. Day 1 postmarks bombshell. I'm standing in the middle of my makeshift studio, a corner of the dining room I've cleared out, pushing the table against the wall. The morning light streaming in, kinda highlighting the chaos of my art supplies spread all over. Mommy, what's all this? Lily, my 6-year-old, parks herself right in the middle of the chaos, her eyes as round as the splattered paint drops on the floor. Mommy's gotta make a birthday present, baby. I reply, rifling through old brushes with bristles stiffer than my back feels. For who? She picks up a brush, examining the crusty edges like a pro. For a lady Daddy works with, I explain, snatching the brush from her before it becomes a makeshift sword or fairy wand. Lily's forehead scrunches up in confusion. But why can't Daddy buy something? Lily, go watch your cartoons, will ya? I need to think. I'm not in the mood to unpack the complexities of our bank account or my marriage to a kindergartner. Grumbling something under her breath, sounding too much like me for comfort, she trots off to the living room, leaving me to my quandary. The week grinds by. I'm pulling double shifts, daytime mommy, nighttime Picasso. The canvas starts to fill, taking on a life of its own. Something abstract, something that feels kind of like the whirlwind that's my life lately. I don't hear a peep from Mark. No check-in calls, not even a text asking how it's going. Guess he's too wrapped up in his charts and deals, and whatever he does that's too important to ring his wife. Lily, on the other hand, is my tiny shadow, always creeping back to watch me paint. You're really good, Mommy, she says on what, day 4? You should draw stuff more. I smile because that's probably the best review I'll ever get. Think so, huh? Maybe I will. The night before the big reveal, the painting's finally staring back at me, done. It's not just art, it's everything I haven't been able to say or do, all poured out onto canvas. I can't sleep that night, tossing and turning, thoughts swirling in my head. What if Clara hates it? What if Mark thinks I've wasted my time? What if? But the morning comes, clear and bright. The painting's wrapped up, no fancy paper, just brown parcel stuff, but neat. A nice bow from Lily's hair ribbons, because why not? So, there I was, at the boss's wife's birthday bash, my arms wrapped tight around a package, the painting I hoped would be a hit. I slid through the crowd, eyes low, wishing I could blend into the wallpaper. Mark was there too, just flown in hot from his latest trip, looking every inch the man who had it all, except the picture-perfect trophy wife. His eyes swept over the women, polished and perfect in their cocktail dresses, then landed on me like a ton of bricks. I saw that look on his face, like he just bit into a lemon. He looked me up and down and shook his head just enough so only I'd notice. The room faded a bit, like someone turned down the volume on the party, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Then his gaze zeroed in on the parcel, all wrapped up and nestled in my shaky grip. His eyes flashed, and oh boy, I knew that look. I saw the storm brewing before the first word even shot out. "What's that?" he spat, barely keeping a lid on it. I pulled the package closer, as if I could shield it, and me, from what was coming. "It's a gift. My painting." The words barely had a chance to hang in the air before his voice boomed. "A painting? You're kidding, right?" It was loud enough to catch a few glances our way. I tried to shush him with my eyes, but he was past caring. "You actually think this is okay? To hand her a piece of amateur hour?" The whispers around us started like the start of a rain, soft but getting stronger. "Mark, please, not here," I begged, my cheeks flaming up something fierce. "Did you lose your mind?" he roared, and the room didn't just pause, it froze. "You make us look like fools." By now, we were the main event. Eyes flicked to us, then away, then back again like they were watching tennis. I shrank, wished I could melt right into the floorboards. His face was a shade of red I'd only ever seen on traffic lights. "Great, just great, Grace," he vented, throwing his hands up. "You don't think, do ya?" The heat in my face told me I was blushing, and not in a cute way. My hands shook, but I hugged the painting tighter, 'cause what else was there to hang on to? I took a breath, tried to remember why I thought this was a good idea. "Now everyone's gonna have a go at us, thanks to you and your dumb idea," he added, sharp as a knife, for anyone still pretending they weren't listening. My mouth opened, words ready to tumble out, to defend or maybe just to tell him to put a sock in it. But what was there to say with the whole room's eyes burning holes into us? Instead, I just stood there, the fool he called me, wishing the ground would do me a favor and swallow me whole. The laughter after Mark's outburst felt like daggers. Even with the room spinning, I caught the boss's eye. He was just watching, all quiet, with something like confusion on his face. And his wife, Clara, she had this half-concerned, half-intrigued frown that actually gave me a sliver of hope. Clara waved a hand, cutting through the noise. "Quiet down, everyone. Let's see what Grace has brought." I moved on autopilot, my hands still a bit jittery as they tore the paper from the canvas. The art kinda just spilled out into the room, all the colors and the shapes I'd spent nights pouring myself into. Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Oh my," she said, and the room hushed like they were waiting for her to drop the hammer. But then she continued, "This is quite something, Grace." Mark was still fuming by my side. "Yeah, something all right." I ignored him and searched Clara's face for some sign. It's for you," I mumbled. "Happy birthday?" She tilted her head, studying the painting like it was a puzzle. "It's bold. I like bold. Don't you, darling?" She nudged her husband, pulling him into this. The boss was a tough guy to read, but he nodded. "Don't see something like that every day." Mark tried to jump back in. "Oh, come on, you're saying you like this mess?" And there it was, the snap in Clara's voice as she turned to him with a squint. "Mark, I'd watch it if I were you. Your wife has talent, and I won't have you embarrass her any further. It's unbecoming." The room fell into this tense kind of quiet, the kind where you could hear someone sneeze 3 houses down. "Look at the colors, the feeling in it," Clara was saying now. "It's got life." Mark tried for a save. "Well, sure, if you like that sort of thing." But Clara cut him off. "I do. It's decided. This goes right in the foyer." I blinked. Was this actually happening? "You sure, babe?" the boss chimed in. "It's not exactly." Clara shot him a look, and he trailed off, standard. Right. It's unique. Her arm shot out to me, a beacon in the high heels and overpriced suit. See? Thank you, Grace. This here's a real gift, folks. It's got soul. And just like that, the murmurs started up again, but they had a different tune. People were nodding, some even looking at me with what felt like respect. Clara, still holding my painting like it was a treasure, turned her eyes on me again. So, Grace, she said, drawing the room's focus, ever thought about showing your work? Like in a gallery? Mark let out a scoff. I heard it, but my eyes were glued to Clara. Nah, who'd want to see my stuff? Don't worry, Grace. I would. And I know people. Clara's voice was firm, her eyes sharp. Mark tried to laugh it off. Come on, Clara, she's just dabbling. Clara quirked an eyebrow at him. So she dabbles better than some pros I know. What's it to you? I swallowed, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something big. I don't know. I've never. What's to know? You jump in. I'll help. Right? Clara's look said she wasn't asking, she was telling. A giggle slipped from me. It was nervous, a bit wild-sounding even to my own ears. Sure. Right. Clara beamed. Good. It's settled then. After that, whispers flitted around like moths to a flame. People who barely gave me the time of day were now hanging on my arm, talking about my work. It felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life. Mark was suddenly there again, his hand on my back almost scalding. You're not serious about this, are you? There was that edge in his voice, like a knife threatening to cut. I turned to him, feeling the weight of the crowd, the pull of something new. Yeah, I am. My voice was stronger than it had felt in years. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night. But, what about us? What about us, Mark? I repeated. We've been over for a longer time than I want to admit. That shook him. He stepped back. I thought we were fine. I turned to face him fully. You thought wrong. The words were colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking beaten. So what, we just end it? I looked down at the colors splashed across the nails on my fingers, at the rings that didn't mean what they were supposed to anymore. We ended it a long time ago. Now we're just making it official. He didn't have anything to say to that. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched. Clara's hand touched my shoulder. You okay, hon? I nodded. I am. Thanks to you. She winked. What are friends for, right? And you, Grace? She paused, giving my shoulder a squeeze. You're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait. And with that, I felt my heart start to hammer for a whole new set of reasons. Ahead of me, there wasn't just an ending. There was a beginning, and it was painted in the boldest colors I could imagine. Lily and I? We'd be more than fine. We'd be us, unapologetically, unfalteringly us. My name is Polly. I was sitting at the top of the stairs, just out of sight. I could hear them in the kitchen, their voices all tangled up like a bunch of knotted shoelaces. Mom and Frank, the guy who swooped into our lives like some kind of low-rent Superman, minus the cape and all the good stuff. Frank, she's my daughter, I heard Mom say, a tremble sneaking into her voice like it was trying to tiptoe around him. Look, Sheila, I didn't sign up for this, you know? It's bad enough I gotta deal with this place being a mess and you're cooking. He grumbled so loudly, I could hear his words clear as day. Now I got my own kid on the way, and I need to think about that, not this. Say it, Mom dared him, quieter now. Say what you mean, Frank. He snorted. Not this leech you got hanging on us. What is she, huh? Just a mouth to feed. Someone I got no bond with. She's just gotta go. Mom exhaled long and sorrowful, like the air itself was heavy with regret. But where would she go? I felt like my heart was a punching bag, and Frank was the kind of guy who didn't know when to stop swinging. What about her aunt? That sister of what's his name, the dead guy? Linda? But. No buts, Sheila. Geez, you're always so soft. She's family, ain't she? Let her deal with the kid. There was a quiet beep as someone pressed a number on the phone, and my ears strained to hear the rest. Yeah, hi Linda? Frank here. Yeah, you're about to do me a solid. Got a bit of a situation. Well, no, not a health thing. It's about the kid, Sheila's daughter. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could just disappear into the worn carpet beneath me. Yes, Polly, Frank's voice was gruff, impatient. Look, here's the deal. She's coming to live with you. What? Nah, don't worry about it. She's practically invisible anyway. Won't even know she's there. I heard Mom's shuffling feet, like she was pacing or fidgeting, probably wringing her hands the way she did when she was torn up about something. Linda, it's Sheila. Yes, I know. We're in a tight spot. I can't, with the baby coming. The next voice, Aunt Linda's, cut through the line, sharp and cold like the knives she used to make her overcooked roasts. Fine. I'll take her. But I'm not running a charity here, Sheila. You better keep sending checks. I could almost see Mom wincing, even from where I sat. It stung, knowing the rest of my things in that duffel bag weren't half as important as those checks to Aunt Linda. Footsteps hammered towards the stairs, and I scampered up and into my room, heartbeat thundering so hard in my chest it nearly drowned out the sounds of the looming goodbye. Mom knocked softly, as if the force of her own hand could shatter me. Honey, she started, pushing the door open, her face all twisted in a way that let you know the I'm sorry was coming before a word left her lips. You're gonna stay with Aunt Linda for a bit. I stood there, my arms tight around that duffel bag, like it was the only thing I had left in the whole sorry world. Because, maybe, it was. With a glance back at the room that had been mine, I stepped out into the dim hallway, Mom trailing behind me like a shadow I wished I could shake. I didn't even turn to look at her as I walked out the front door. It was easier that way. Standing on the porch, Aunt Linda looked me up and down as I clutched my duffel bag, each second stretching out like hours. So you're here, Polly, she finally spoke, the words flat and hard. Hi, Aunt Linda. I managed to mutter, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't just stand there, bring your stuff in. But remember, I run a tight ship. You'll follow my rules under my roof, she said, turning on her heel and heading inside. I followed her into the house, which had the warmth of an ice cube. Rule 1, no shoes in the house. Park 'em by the door. And don't you dare drag in any dirt. I keep a clean home. I nodded, slipping off my sneakers and leaving them neatly by the entrance. Rule 2, lights out by 9 on school nights. I won't have any late-night gallivanting or nonsense, she continued, ticking off her rules on her fingers as she went. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rule 3, don't talk back. Don't question me. Just do as you're told, quick and without fuss. Her house was like a museum, everything in its place and nothing out of line. The living room looked barely lived in. Plastic covers clung to the sofas, and I'd bet my last dollar they'd never been sat on. Aunt Linda caught my gaze and snapped, those are for protection, not for sitting. God help you if I catch a crease in them. I just nodded again, trying to take it all in. A few days in and it felt like I was walking on eggshells that were rigged to explode. I spent my time trying to be invisible, hoping that'd save me from her sharp tongue. One day, I slipped up, I spilled a bit of milk on the counter. Quick as I could, I wiped it up, but not quick enough. What's this, a puddle? Aunt Linda had appeared like a whisper, and her voice was like thunder. Wasting food and making a mess. I got it, Aunt Linda. It's clean now. I showed her the rag, trying to prove it was just a small spill. You think sorry and a rag fixes everything? You think I have the time and money to waste on your clumsiness? No, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Like I needed more problems. Your mom sends you here like I got nothing better to do, she grumbled. Even your own mom didn't want you, so why should I? Her words hit me square in the chest. I stood there, jaw tight, swallowing the hurt because crying wouldn't change a thing. I knew arguing would only make it worse. The rules were clear, and Aunt Linda was the kind who never bent them. Not for anyone. Sorry, won't happen again, was all I could get out. You're right, it won't. Because if something like this happens again, we're gonna have a bigger problem, you hear me? Loud and clear, I answered. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Dinner was a silent affair. Aunt Linda liked eating without the sound of anyone else's breathing, it seemed. I tried to chew quietly, making every move deliberate, wishing I could just disappear into my room already. Days bled into weeks and weeks into months, each as unremarkable as the last, until one afternoon. I was sitting on the carpet in my room, the one with the faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. My room at Aunt Linda's was just another box in the stack, nothing like my old one back at Mom's. With Aunt Linda at the grocery store, I grabbed the cordless phone from its cradle in the living room. My heart was racing as I punched in Mom's number, a sequence I still knew by heart. Years of dialing it for takeout or when there was a spider too big for me to handle alone. The phone rang and rang. On the fourth, she picked up. Yeah? Mom, it's me, Polly. I blurted out before my courage could fail. There was a pause, a breath, a sigh. What do you want? I miss you, Don't. She cut in, her voice icy. Don't ever call here again. The line clicked dead. I stood there, phone in hand, her words a new weight in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the rejection that stung, it was the finality of it. I hope that was important. Aunt Linda's voice came from behind me like a winter's draft. I turned, startled, the phone slipping slightly from my grasp. I just wanted to talk to her, I said, my voice failing to hide the quiver. She snatched the phone from my hand, her eyes narrow slits. You think these calls are free? I'm sorry, I'll pay for it, I stammered, though I had no idea how. Aunt Linda snorted. Pay for it? With what? No, you've caused enough trouble. I'm done with it, done with you. Before I could plead, she was on the phone, barking into the receiver. Yeah, Betty? Get a room ready. She's coming to you. I barely had time to process her words before I found myself holding a bus ticket and a hastily repacked duffel bag. She dumped me at the bus stop with a shake of her head and a good riddance that followed me onto the bus. I was on my way to Grandma's, and as the bus chugged along, the town I knew became a blur. I thought about Mom's voice, that tone I'd never heard before. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, the hum of the engine a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Grandma lived in a smaller town a couple of hours away, in a house that was as old but twice as cozy as Aunt Linda's. She was standing on the porch when I arrived, her eyebrows drawn down in concern. You okay, Polly? She asked as I trudged up the steps. I shook my head. Aunt Linda sent me away. Mom doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Grandma sighed, opening her arms wide. I stepped into her hug like it was a safe haven. Families can be tough, she murmured. Come on in, I'll make you some tea. As I sank down at her kitchen table, surrounded by the comforting scent of cinnamon and apples, the warmth of the room unfreezing my fingers, I started to realize something hard. That sometimes, the idea of a parent isn't what you get. And maybe, just maybe, I had to start figuring out how to deal with that. The day I settled into Grandma's house, I could tell it was a different world. The walls were lined with pictures of plants and landscapes, unlike the museums back at Aunt Linda's place. Grandma was already in the kitchen, the heart of her home, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Gran, you need help with anything? I called out as I dragged my bag inside. Without missing a beat in her humming, she replied, Nah, just park yourself at the table. Gonna fix us some grub. Her voice was raspy from years of yelling over the noise of farm machinery back when she used to run the family's apple orchard. Now, the most noise she dealt with was the creaking of the porch swing and the clatter of her old pots and pans. As the weeks passed, I fell into step with her ways. Wake up before the sun, help with breakfast, then off to school. After school, help around the house, dinner, homework, and bed. No frills, no drama. One chilly afternoon, Grandma found me on the porch swing, the horizon painted orange and pink by the setting sun. "Got something to tell ya," she said, pulling the other side of the swing down with her weight. I tightened my grip on the chains of the swing. Whatever it was, Grandma wasn't one for beating around the bush. "You're not just staying here, you know. This isn't temporary." She held out some papers to me. "I've gone and made it official. You're mine now, for good." I scanned the papers. Words like custody and guardianship jumped out at me. She'd done it. "Why'd you do this, Gran?" To me, it seemed like taking on a burden more trouble than a teenage girl was worth. "'Cause you're blood, kid. More than that. You got spirit. Remember, tenderness beneath the strength." She repeated her old saying and tapped her chest. "Right here is where you've gotta be toughest." We sat quiet for a while, the swing creaking under us, the sky darkening. I let her words wrap around me like the quilts on my new bed upstairs. "Thanks, Gran," I finally said. That was all. Thanks. It sounded lame even to my own ears. "Well, don't thank me yet. You'll be pulling extra weeds tomorrow, make no mistake." Her tone was playful, but I knew she'd hold me to it. Sitting on the swing now, a few days after my sweet 16, I could see that Grandma's house wasn't just a haven. It was a starting line. And with her backing, I was finally ready to run my race. The morning sun hadn't even cracked the sky when Grandma kicked the bottom of my bed. "Rise and shine, Doc," she barked, same as she had every morning since I started med school. I groaned, my hand searching for the alarm clock. "It's not even light out, Gran." World don't wait for light. Cows don't milk themselves. Patients don't cure themselves, neither. She didn't have cows to milk, of course. It was about getting a point across, like always. Afternoons at the hospital were a blur of white walls and beeping monitors. By the time I got back, evening had settled in, and the house glowed with warm light. "How'd it go?" Grandma was at the stove, poking at something that smelled like heaven. "Good, real good." I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, watching her move around the kitchen. "Dr. Klein let me lead a minor procedure." She raised her eyebrows, a spoon still in her hand dripping some sauce. "Is that right? And how'd that feel?" "Scary as hell," I admitted. "But I did it, and it went well." "That's 'cause you're made of tough stuff." She plated the food and set it on the small kitchen table. "Earned your stripes today, huh?" "Feels like it," I agreed, diving into dinner. Afterward, we sat on the porch, me with a textbook, her with her knitting. The night was quiet, the only sound the crickets and the occasional turn of a page or click of needles. "Thinkin' of Ted?" she asked out of the blue. Ted was the first boy I brought home, a lifetime ago it seemed. Not much time for that. I didn't even glance up from my book. Relationships took time and energy I didn't have. "You make time for what's important," she countered. "There's more to life than just work and study." I sighed. "Maybe after my residency, Gran." She nodded, knowing that was the best I could offer right then. "Just remember, life's short." I smiled at her words, thinking how many times I'd heard just that. "Never forget, you got more to give than just being a good doctor. Got a heart that needs sharing too." It was in this simple way that she kept my feet on the ground, reminding me there was a world outside medicine, and one day, I'd be a part of that too. We didn't talk much after that. The night wrapped around us, a blanket of peace as I pondered a future that seemed both exciting and terrifying. As the clock ticked towards tomorrow, I knew one thing for sure, whatever the future held, I'd face it head on. Just like Grandma taught me. I should have known when Gran missed breakfast for the third day straight. It's nothing, she'd said, waving off my concern. But nothing didn't leave you pale and worn out, nothing didn't whisper lies in a voice that trembled like an old barn in a storm. The news hit like a brick. It's cancer, the doctor told me, voice flat like the EKG I wished was for someone else, anyone else. You serious? I'd asked, eyes darting from the doctor to Gran, who sat there nodding like she'd known all along. As serious as it gets, Gran said. She sat up straight, no tears, just that squared chin that always meant business. The battle was short and fierce, and through it all, she'd never let me see her scared. Until one quiet morning when she finally let go of the fight, the breath slipping from her in a soft sigh, like she was slipping into a warm bath. After, the house felt empty, like someone had scooped out the middle and left me with a shell. I walked through the funeral like someone else, shaking hands, accepting hugs, hearing murmurs of "she loved you like her own." They didn't get it, not really. It wasn't like she was my own, she was my everything. After everyone had gone, I stayed back, leaning on the cool marble, staring at the casket that was too new, too shiny. Left alone, I whispered to Gran, like I used to when it was just me and her against the world. I'll make you proud, I swear. The next morning, I found myself at the hospital, the hall sterile and smelling of disinfectant. My hands were steady, my mind clear. This was where I belonged. I might have lost Gran, but I was going to save others, keep going, just like she would have wanted. In surgery, my hands didn't shake. Gran's strength lived in me. Each stitch was a promise, a testament to her legacy, a legacy of love. Love that didn't end with last breaths or in silent funeral halls. It was the love that pushed you forward when life kicked you in the teeth. The love that made you square your shoulders and face each day knowing you were never really alone. Mom always had a flair for drama, like she could smell money from miles away and come sprinting. The doorbell rang one lazy Sunday, pulling me away from medical journals and a cup of coffee. I opened the door and there they were, like some twisted version of a family reunion photo. Mom looked at me with those hawkish eyes, and before I could even get out a hello, she was in with the ask. You've gotta share, it's only fair. Half is ours by rights, she said, her hand fluttering around like a bird trying to get out of a cage. Stepdad just leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He had that look, the one he got when he knew Mom had a great idea. Sarah hung back, not saying a word, just scrolling on her phone. I couldn't help it, a laugh just bubbled up. Oh, you? For what, exactly? Last time I checked, you kicked me out when I was 11. Mom's eyes narrowed to slits. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. That has to be worth something. Fed? Clothed? More like rations and hand-me-downs. I crossed my arms, mirroring stepdad. I was not going to be bullied. But Gran, she said, the word almost a slur, she left you everything, and we're struggling here. Stepdad took a step forward. Listen, just give us what we deserve and we can all walk away from this peacefully. I shook my head, a mix of anger and disbelief churning in my gut. Gran didn't leave you a penny, 'cause she knew exactly what sort of people you are. Matter of fact, you remember that whole thing when I was a kid, about where I came from? Well, turns out Gran adopted me when I was a baby, so legally, I'm not even obligated to give you the time of day, let alone any inheritance. Mom went pale as a sheet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No. Sarah looked up then, her face confused. What's she saying, Mom? Stepdad's face transformed into a dark cloud. She's saying we're not getting a damn thing. That's right, I affirmed. You won't get anything from me. You'll regret this, Stepdad growled, a vein bulging in his neck. I stepped out, bracing myself against the frame of the door, the morning sun hot on my back. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice steelier than I felt. He squared his shoulders, but I wasn't 11 and scared anymore. It's a promise. Mom grabbed his arm, giving me a look that could curdle milk. "Let's go," she hissed. I stepped back inside and closed the door, the click of the latch loud in the quiet house. Gran was gone, but she left me more than money. She left me the courage to stand up to them and the sense of worth they'd tried to take from me. Neighbors gave me the heads up with a quick call, "That sort of just thought you should know ring that meant trouble. Your mom and her lot set up camp in your grandma's old house," they said, all concerned and a bit gossip hungry. That house was mine and mine alone, Grandma made sure of that. The nerve of them, thinking they could just move in and not one soul would tell me. "Guys," I said, knocking on the door louder than necessary, "you can't just crash here. This isn't a motel." Mom yanked the door open, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Polly, we're family," she exclaimed, leaning against the doorframe like she owned the place. Stepdad loomed behind her, his look less welcoming. "We're not going anywhere. This is as much ours as it is yours," he stated with that smug smirk that made my blood heat up. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket. "The house is mine, legally. You have one day to get out, or I'm calling the cops." They laughed, the kind that grates on your nerves. "Yeah, sure. Call the cops on your family. That'll look great," Stepdad jeered, his arms folded across his chest. I didn't want a scene, but they left me no choice. The next morning, they were still there, lounging around as if they owned the place. That's when I made the call. When the cops rolled up, I could almost taste the sour change in the air. I stood by, arms crossed, watching through the living room window. "Ma'am, sir, you need to leave the premises. Now," one officer said firmly, his hand resting near his belt. "But she's my daughter," Mom tried to plead, her voice shifting to desperation. "And I'm her stepdad," added Stepdad, that tick in his jaw back like a storm warning. "Doesn't matter. You don't own this house and the owner wants you out," the second cop chimed in, stepping forward. They'd finally stopped laughing. I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the reality that they couldn't bulldoze their way through life anymore. I didn't budge until their car was a speck in the distance, and then turned to face the empty house. It felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. It was quiet, the kind of peace that comes when a storm has passed and left clear skies in its wake. Stepping into the house, the air felt different, lighter. Grandma's voice didn't echo the way it did before, now it was in my own head, words that came like a bomb, soothing over years of scars. With each step, I started to reclaim the space. The kitchen, where Grandma taught me to bake, the living room, where she healed my teenage heartaches with ice cream and tough love, and her bedroom, where she'd say prayers that I'd find my way in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. I made coffee, the aroma filling the space, binding me to this house, this moment. Sitting at the kitchen table, I raised my cup to the new day. Justice served, and served well. Hi there. I'm Linda. My life took a pretty unexpected turn when I married Tom. He was a great guy, a widower, with a sweet little girl named Sarah. She was 7 when I came into the picture, her mom having left when she was just a toddler. I walked into their lives hoping to make things better, to bring some love and stability. But, let's just say, things didn't go as planned. The first time I met Sarah, I remember trying to break the ice. "Hey, Sarah, I've heard so much about you. I brought some cookies. Do you like chocolate chip?" I asked, holding out a plate. She just stared at the cookies, then at me, with this look of total indifference. "I guess," she finally muttered, taking one, but avoiding eye contact. Tom smiled apologetically. "She's a bit shy around new people. Give it time, Linda." I wanted to be patient, to understand what she was going through. But it wasn't long before I noticed her coldness wasn't just shyness. Things got even more complicated when our son Danny was born. Sarah's behavior took a turn for the worse. She seemed to resent him, seeing him as a threat to her relationship with her dad. One evening, I found Danny crying in his room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, concerned. "Sarah said I'm a mistake and that Daddy doesn't love me," he sobbed. My heart sank. I confronted Sarah about it. Why would you say something like that to Danny? He's your little brother. He's not my brother. You're not my mom. She snapped back, her eyes defiant. Tom tried to mediate things, but it was like walking on eggshells. Sarah, Linda's just trying to be a good mom to both of you. Sarah would roll her eyes. She's not my mom. Don't forget that. It was tough. Every attempt I made to bond with her was met with resistance or outright hostility. And it wasn't just within our four walls. Her grandparents, Tom's parents, were another story. I remember one Sunday dinner, Tom's mom pulled me aside. Linda, you need to try harder with Sarah. She feels left out since Danny came along. I was frustrated. I've been trying, but she won't let me in. It's like she's decided to hate me no matter what I do. Tom's dad chimed in. She's just a child, Linda. You're the adult here. You should make more of an effort. It felt like a no-win situation. I was trying my best, but nothing seemed to work. Sarah had built a wall around herself, and I just couldn't find a way through. As she grew into her teens, Sarah's behavior only got more challenging. She would flout rules, talk back, and her attitude towards me became more hostile. I felt like I was failing her, failing our family. But I wasn't about to give up. I just hoped that someday, somehow, we'd find a way to come together as a real family. Sarah's teenage years were like navigating a minefield. Every conversation felt like a potential explosion. I remember one morning trying to talk to her about school. Sarah, why weren't you in school yesterday? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She just shrugged, pouring herself a bowl of cereal. Didn't feel like going. But your education is important, I persisted. You can't just skip school whenever you want. Sarah rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. What are you gonna do, ground me? You're not my mom. I felt a flash of frustration. I'm not trying to replace your mom, Sarah. I just care about you. She scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, right. You just want to make sure your perfect little family looks good. I was at a loss. How do you reach someone who's determined to keep you out? Tom, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap between us. One evening, he sat down with Sarah, trying to have a heart-to-heart. Sarah, Linda's just trying to help, he said gently. She cares about you. Sarah's response was cold and bitter. She's not my mom, Dad. Stop trying to make her into something she's not. Tom looked defeated, his usual optimism faltering. I know she's not your mom, but she's part of our family now. We need to try to get along. Sarah just got up and left the room, her silence speaking volumes. Tom's parents were another hurdle. They seemed to believe that I could do no right by Sarah. During a family get-together, Tom's mom pulled me aside again. Linda, you need to be more understanding of Sarah's feelings, she said, her tone implying I was being heartless. I felt my patience wearing thin. I've tried, but she won't let me in. It's like she hates me. Tom's mom just shook her head. She's a sensitive girl. You need to try harder. It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter what I said, it seemed to fall on deaf ears. They had made up their minds about me, and nothing I could say or do would change that. The tension in our house was palpable. Danny, who was just a little boy, often got caught in the crossfire of Sarah's outbursts. He didn't understand why his sister was so hostile. Why does Sarah hate us, Mom? Danny asked one night, his little face scrunched up in confusion. I hugged him close, trying to shield him from the harsh reality. She doesn't hate us, Danny. She's just going through a tough time. But even I wasn't convinced by my own words. Sarah's behavior was more than just teenage rebellion. It felt personal, targeted. And I couldn't help but feel responsible, like I was the catalyst for all this discord. I lay awake many nights, wondering where we had gone wrong. Was there something I could have done differently? some way I could have reached out to her that I hadn't thought of? The questions haunted me, but answers were nowhere to be found. The day I got the call from the local police station about Sarah, my stepdaughter, felt like a punch in the gut. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone vibrated relentlessly. Excusing myself, I stepped out to answer what I assumed was another of Sarah's school-related issues. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Martinez. We've detained your stepdaughter, Sarah. She's involved in a vandalism incident." The officer's voice was firm, almost disapproving. "Vandalism? Are you sure we're talking about the same Sarah?" I stammered, my mind racing. "Yes, ma'am. Sarah Johnson, 15 years old. We need you to come and pick her up." I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I'll be right there," I replied, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me as I hurried out. At the station, Sarah was slouched in a chair, her arms crossed, an air of defiance about her. She looked up as I approached, her expression one of annoyance rather than remorse. "Sarah, what in the world were you thinking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, relax, Linda. It's not like I killed someone. We just sprayed some paint. No big deal." I was aghast. "Not a big deal?" "Sarah, this is illegal. You could be in serious trouble." Sarah snorted, standing up. "Well, I'm not. Can we go now? This place is depressing." The car ride home was a tense silence. I knew this was a conversation for both Tom and me to handle, but with him away on a business trip, I felt overwhelmed and alone. That evening, with Danny asleep, I made a call to Tom. "Tom, we have a serious problem with Sarah," I said, my voice shaky. "I know, Linda, the school has called me a few times already." "What's happened now?" Tom sounded tired. "She was detained by the police today, Tom. For vandalism," I explained, the severity of the situation hanging heavily in the air. There was a pause on the other end. "Jesus, Linda. I don't even know what to say." "We need to get her help, Tom. Therapy, counseling, something. She's out of control," I urged, feeling desperate. Tom sighed, the sound heavy and defeated. "Okay, I'll be back in 2 days. We'll sort this out." I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief, but mostly dread for what was to come. When Tom finally sat down with Sarah to discuss therapy, it was like igniting a fuse. "I'm not going to any shrink," Sarah spat, her eyes blazing. "You can't make me." Tom, trying to remain calm, countered, "It's not about making you, Sarah. It's about helping you." Sarah laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Help me? Please? You just want to dump me on someone else, because you can't deal with me." Tom's patience was wearing thin. "That's not true, Sarah, and you know it. We're worried about you." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Save it, Dad. I'm not your little project. I'm out of here." And with that, she stormed out, the door slamming shut behind her. The next thing we knew, she was at her grandparents', refusing to come home or even talk to us. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and helplessness. Our family felt like it was falling apart at the seams, and at the center of it all was Sarah, a teenage girl we just couldn't seem to reach no matter how hard we tried. Things hit rock bottom the day Sarah decided she'd had enough of our rules and bolted to her grandparents'. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and dismay, our family home feeling emptier than ever. Sitting in the living room, Tom kept glancing at his phone, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. I can't believe she'd just up and leave like that," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. I exhaled deeply, feeling a storm of emotions brewing inside me. "Tom, she's out of control. We can't just let her walk all over us. It's not right." Tom's expression was one of defeat. "I know, Linda, I know. But what can we do? She's just not listening to us." Determined to get some answers, we decided to call Tom's parents. The conversation, however, quickly turned sour. "Mom, this is Tom. We need to talk about Sarah," Tom began, trying to keep his voice level. His mom was quick to defend Sarah. "Oh, Tom, she's just so distraught. She feels like Linda's pushing her away, trying to send her to a therapist like she's some sort of problem." I couldn't keep silent. "That's not it at all. She's been getting into trouble, and we're worried about her," I snapped back, my patience wearing thin. Tom's dad jumped in, his voice bristling with irritation. "Linda, you're just not understanding her. She's a delicate girl, and you've been too harsh." I felt my blood boil. Too harsh? She's been acting out, breaking laws. We're trying to do what's best for her. "Well, she's staying here now. We'll handle it our way," Tom's mom retorted, her tone dismissive. Tom and I exchanged a look of frustration and helplessness. "You're just going to let her skip school and hang out with God knows who?" Tom challenged, his voice rising. "She's just going through a phase. She'll settle down," his dad said nonchalantly, as if Sarah's behavior was no big deal. After the call, the sense of powerlessness was overwhelming. It was as if Sarah had everyone wrapped around her finger, and we were the villains for trying to impose some boundaries. In the following days, Sarah's absence cast a shadow over our home. Her room, untouched and gathering dust, was a constant reminder of the rift in our family. We sent money to Tom's parents for Sarah's expenses, but it felt like throwing money into a bottomless pit. There was no improvement, no change, just silent acceptance of her rebellion. One evening, as I tucked our son Danny into bed, his little face clouded with confusion. "Mom, why did Sarah leave? Doesn't she like us anymore?" I stroked his hair gently, fighting back my own emotions. "Danny, it's complicated. Sarah's dealing with a lot right now. But we love her, and we're here for her whenever she's ready." Walking out of Danny's room, the weight of our family's situation hit me full force. We were a family torn apart, not by distance, but by defiance and misunderstanding. And at the heart of it all was Sarah, a girl I had hoped to embrace as my daughter, now a stranger living under another roof. For years, our house had been calm, almost too calm, without Sarah's tumultuous presence. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at our doorstep, her announcement as unexpected as her visit. Tom and I were in the kitchen when she walked in, a confident, almost brash look on her face. "Hey," she said casually, as if she hadn't been away for years. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Tom asked, surprise written all over his face. "I've got news. I'm getting married," she declared, a smug smile playing on her lips. Tom and I exchanged glances, a mixture of shock and cautious optimism in our eyes. "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations," I managed to say, though a part of me remained wary. "Yeah, thanks. But here's the thing," Sarah continued, getting straight to the point. "I need money for the wedding." Tom's expression hardened slightly. "Money? Sarah, you haven't been home in years, and now you show up asking for money?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dad. It's not like you can't afford it. And it's not like I'm asking for much." I could feel the tension in the room escalating. "Sarah, it's not just about the money. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect us to." "Look, Linda," Sarah cut me off, her tone dismissive. "I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking Dad for a favor." The audacity of her request left me stunned. "Sarah, we're a family. We make these decisions together," I said firmly. Sarah scoffed. "Please, you're not my family. You're just the woman my dad married." Tom intervened, trying to keep the peace. "Sarah, that's enough. Linda's right. We're a family, and we make decisions together." She looked at Tom, her expression softening slightly. "Dad, please. It's my wedding. I just want it to be perfect." Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We'll think about it, Sarah. But you can't just expect us to hand over the money without some discussion." Sarah's demeanor shifted then, as if realizing her approach wasn't working. I know. I'm sorry. I really want this to be special. After she left, Tom and I had a long talk. Maybe this is a chance for us to mend things, I suggested, hopeful yet cautious. Tom nodded slowly. Maybe. But we're not just writing her a blank check. We need to be involved in the planning, make sure the money is used appropriately. I agreed. Despite Sarah's brashness, this could be our opportunity to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn a new page with her. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Sarah's sudden return and request felt like just the calm before another storm. The days leading up to Sarah's wedding were a whirlwind of preparations. Tom and I decided to contribute generously to her wedding fund, hoping it would be a step towards mending our fractured relationship. But things took a shocking turn just a few days before the wedding. I decided to call the wedding planner to check on how the preparations were going. The conversation started off normal enough, but I could sense something was off. Hi, this is Linda Johnson, Sarah's stepmom. I'm just calling to check on the wedding preparations, I said, trying to sound casual. The wedding planner's voice was tense, hesitant. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, yes, the preparations are going well, but... But what? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. There was a pause, and then she said, I'm not sure how to say this, but Sarah, she's made some changes to the guest list. Changes to the guest list? What kind of changes? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The planner's voice was low, almost apologetic. She's removed you, Mr. Johnson, and Danny from the list. But she's added her biological mother. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Her mother? The one who left her? Yes, and there's something else. The planner continued, her voice hesitant. The budget for the wedding, it's significantly less than the amount you gave her. I was stunned into silence. Sarah had taken the money we gave her for the wedding and spent only a fraction of it, cutting us out of her big day in the process. After hanging up, I confronted Tom with the news. His reaction was one of disbelief and then growing anger. That ungrateful little... Tom started, his fists clenched. Tom, calm down, I said, though I shared his outrage. We need to talk to her about this. When we finally got Sarah on the phone, the conversation was anything but pleasant. Sarah, why did you remove us from the wedding guest list? Tom demanded, his voice tight with anger. Sarah's response was cold and matter-of-fact. Because I don't want your wife there. This is my day, and I'll have who I want. And what about the money? I asked, struggling to keep my composure. You spent only a fraction of what we gave you. That's none of your business, she snapped back. You gave me the money, it's mine to use how I see fit. We were at a loss for words. The audacity of her actions left us both reeling. Tom, in a rare display of fury, made a decision. We're taking back our money, Sarah. We won't support this deceit, he said, his voice resolute. You can't do that, Sarah yelled, her voice shrill with panic. We can, and we will, Tom replied firmly. You've crossed a line, Sarah. The call ended with Sarah hurling insults and accusations at us before hanging up. True to his word, Tom canceled the checks, effectively putting a stop to the wedding plans. We had tried to reach out, to mend bridges, but Sarah's actions had made it clear that some rifts were too deep to heal. The fallout from the cancelled wedding hit our family like a hurricane. Sarah's response to our decision was both explosive and bitter. She showed up at our house, her face twisted with rage, hurling accusations and insults. You've ruined everything, she screamed, her eyes blazing. This was supposed to be my day, and you destroyed it. Sarah, you lied to us, Tom countered, his voice firm despite the rising tension. You deceived us about the wedding, about the money. What did you expect? I expected you to back off and let me have my day, she retorted, her fists clenched at her sides. You excluded us from your wedding, Sarah. You took the money for yourself, I added, trying to reason with her. Because it's what I deserved. After years of putting up with you, Sarah spat out, her words cutting through the air. The argument escalated until Sarah, in a final burst of anger, stormed out of the house, swearing she'd never forgive us. In the aftermath, Tom and I were left to pick up the pieces. The situation worsened when we received a call from Tom's parents. They were furious, initially blaming us for the wedding debacle, but then, their anger took a different turn. Linda, Tom, we need to tell you something, Tom's mom said over the phone, her voice shaking. After Sarah left our house, we discovered she took some of my jewelry. Valuable pieces. Tom and I were stunned into silence. She stole from you? Tom finally managed to say, disbelief coloring his tone. Yes, his dad replied, the disappointment evident in his voice. We never thought she'd do something like this to us. Are you going to report it? I asked, a mix of concern and shock in my voice. No, we can't bring ourselves to do that to our granddaughter, but we're so hurt, Tom's mom said, her voice breaking. The revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. It was one thing for Sarah to lash out at us, but to betray her own grandparents in such a way was unthinkable. Days turned into weeks, and there was no word from Sarah. Tom held on to hope that she would come to her senses and reach out, but I wasn't so sure. Tom, do you really think she'll come back after all this? I asked one evening, as we sat in our quiet living room. Tom looked out the window, a far-off look in his eyes. I don't know, Linda. I hope she does. I hope she realizes the mistake she's made and wants to make amends. I sighed, feeling a deep sense of uncertainty. I don't know if she ever will, Tom. The Sarah we knew seems to be long gone. Tom nodded, his expression somber. Maybe you're right. But she's still my daughter. I can't give up hope. As time passed, the silence from Sarah became a new norm. We heard nothing about her whereabouts or well-being. Tom's parents, too, were left in the dark, their feelings of betrayal mingling with worry for their granddaughter. In our home, life went on. Danny grew older, and we focused our energy on him, ensuring he felt loved and secure. But the shadow of Sarah's actions lingered, a reminder of the broken bridges and unhealed wounds in our family. I often found myself wondering about Sarah, about where she was and what she was doing. My feelings were a complex mix of anger, disappointment, and a faint glimmer of concern. Tom remained hopeful, but deep down, I doubted if Sarah would ever return to us, if she would ever seek the help she so desperately needed.